Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for Thursday, May the 9th. If you have a cell phone with you, now would be a really good time to turn it off. I'm getting ready to do that. If there's an item on the agenda about which you would like to address us, you'll find some forms like this out on the table in the hallway. If you'll fill one out for us, it's just simple stuff that would really help us both to keep track of who needs to speak and also later for our record keeping. For those of you who are not with us every other Thursday, the way this works is we have a few things we'll take care of here at the beginning, and then when we get to the items to be heard, individually we'll call each of the applicants up to give us their name and address, tell us what it is that they're here to ask us for. We may have some questions of them. If there's anyone else here who wishes to speak on an item, we'll ask them to come forward, do the same, give us their name and address. We may or may not have questions for them. Then we may or may not discuss the item amongst ourselves, and we'll vote on each in turn. And we're going to start off with the receipt of the minutes from the April 25th meeting of the Planning Commission.
Motion to receive minutes from April 25th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the April 25th meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Would you cast your votes, please? They are received. We have items that have been requested to be continued today. Would you read those for us, please?
We have one uncontested request, item 4B18, to be withdrawn. We have three new requests, items 4B9, 4B10, and 4B12. 4B9 will be deferred to June 30th, as well as B12 and B10 to May 23rd.
Is there anybody here today who thought they wanted to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to withdraw item number 18. Were we doing them all together? And to continue items 9, 10, and 12. Would you cast your votes, please? Those items are, there you go, withdrawn and or continued as stated. We have a few items on the agenda that normally we would vote for individually, but for whatever reason they are straightforward, there's no protest, they seem fairly routine, and so we generally vote on them as a block, what we call our consent agenda. However, I have an item, someone signed up to speak on item number 4, so if you'll read those for us, I'll accept item number 4. We'll hear it in turn.
Okay. Item C, 7066, final plat of Deerbrook, Section 1. Number 2, C, 7068, final plat of Autumn Park, Phase 1. Number 3, application by Ramsey Family Trust, rezone Southwest 59th Street, 2515 Southwest 59th Street from R4 to C3. Item number 4, PC 10583, application by Cody Schmidt to rezone 16700 178th. That's the one that we'll get comment from. Number 5, PC 10584, application by Iman Russell to rezone 3001 South Byers Avenue from I3 to I2. And item 6, PC 10585, application by BNSF to rezone 1900 Southeast 89th from I2 to I3.
So with the exception of item number 4, is there anybody here today that wanted to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
I move approval of all items on the consent docket except for item 4.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue items to approve items 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Would you cast your votes, please? They are approved. So let's start items to be heard with item number 4. Would you read it again, please?
Yeah. Item number 4, PC 10583, application by Cody Schmidt to rezone 16700 Northeast 178th Street from PUD 1336 to AA agricultural.
I'm sorry, but I cannot read this handwriting. It's. If you'll come forward, please, give us your name and address for the record and ask us whatever you like.
Yeah, my name's Charles McRae.
Come to the
My
microphone.
address is 17209 North Triple X Road.
Tell me again your name.
Charles McRae,
Charles.
MCAY.
And your address, I'm sorry.
Is 17209 North Triple X Road.
Okay.
I was just curious why the zoning was changing and what their agenda for, for changing the zoning to agricultural was, what they had planned to do there.
Well, let's see if we can find out. Is our applicant here? Would you come forward, please?
Good afternoon.
Give us your name and address for the record, please, and tell us what it is you're seeking.
Cody Schmidt, and I have that address, 16700 Northeast 178th. The reason for the rezoning was access to the property, basically. The PUD that the larger piece of property is under did not allow me a driveway.
Address the commission, please. Tell me again, what is it?
The original PUD that was on that portion of the property that I purchased would not allow access.
You're talking about the easement that goes down 178th Street there?
Yes,
Right
anywhere along there was not allowed. It was originally supposed to be a subdivision that never went through.
Yeah.
Excuse me, tell me again. I'm not following. Where is your access? What is it you're seeking?
For me to get an address and a driveway legally installed, I would not be able to, within the bounds of that property, due to the larger portion of property within PUD 1336, I think, not allowing any points of access along.
So limits of no access are imposed along Northeast 178th. Clearly, I need my glasses. And is this going to solve their problem, JJ? When we impose limits of no access, it's usually for a reason.
I can't imagine there would be any problem. It's taking it back to AA, which it was before. It was 1336.
We don't often see people rezone property to AA, I must say. Does that answer your question?
I was just curious I've been hearing a lot of speculation on what is going on with the property there. I was just curious. I just wanted to see what that consisted of. I mean, what is your objective is just to get a driveway and not to...
Yeah, to
Are
live
you
on
going to
it.
reside there? That's your objective? Well, yeah, I don't stand in his way to do that. I just was hearing about it.
What he can do with AA property is very limited, so.
I'm sorry?
I said, what he can do with AA property is very limited, so.
Yeah, it's just agricultural. I assume it's the same as what my property down the street would be.
I don't know where you live, but, okay?
Well, yeah, no, yeah, that's fine. I don't want to interfere with his ability to get a driveway. I've been hearing some really negative speculation.
Well, I'm glad you were able to get your questions answered.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
Commissioners, do we have any thoughts, questions, concerns?
I move approval of item 4.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 4. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Onward.
Okay, item number 7, DA 25740, application by the Carlin Group for consideration of lot split deed approval on property located at 1919 Northwest 142nd, along with 2 variances.
Is our applicant present? Would you come forward, please? Give us your name and address. Tell us what it is you're asking for.
Yeah, my name is Dave Schenk, and I represent Carlin Group. What we're looking for is we have a single lot currently, and we're looking to split into 3 lots.
Do I understand correctly that this was part of a larger lot that's already been split? That's why you're needing to do this?
Yes, that's correct. The buildings on the property are already built. They've been standing for 6 years. We're not changing that in one way at all. There's no construction planned. Everything that's built is going to remain.
But you don't have access to a public street, so you need a variance to allow you to take access to a shared private drive, is that right?
Correct. There is a shared use agreement in place for that shared private drive. And so all of those properties will be serviced by that same shared use agreement.
Commissioners, do we have any questions of our applicant? If not, we have 2 variances that we need to vote on. One with respect to the number of lot splits, one with respect to the access to a public street.
I will make a motion to approve the variance, first variance, which is variance to section 3.4.4.C.2 sub B for the newly created parcels to have frontage on an approved street. Variance to that section.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance subdivision regulations regarding access to a public street. Would you cast your votes, please? That is approved.
Make a motion to approve the variance to section 3.4.4.C.2 sub F of the subdivision regulations regarding total number of lot splits.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve variance, the subdivision regulations with respect to the number of lot splits permitted. Would you cast your votes, please? That is approved as well.
Make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 8, SPUD 1120, application by PIME LLC to rezone 2244 Northwest 16th Street from R1 to an SPUD.
Is our applicant present? Give us your name and address for the record and tell us what it is you're seeking, please.
Sure. David Hickey, I represent PIME LLC. The address is 2244 Northwest 16th Street in Oklahoma City, and we're just asking to rezone from R1 to R4.
So this is to bring
In
the
conformity.
property zoning into compliance with the actual use.
That is correct.
Which is a long-standing use.
Right.
Were you able to contact the person who submitted protest to visit with them, Commissioner?
I did not. I didn't even consider it. I felt like their concerns were expressed in the letter, and I didn't know what else I would discuss with them on that.
Well, it seemed to me that their concerns were sort of just based on a lack of information. I think they believed somehow that the property was going to be demolished and turned into something else, is why I ask.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know that
And
I
I can-
interpreted the letter maybe correctly.
I received a letter as well via email or whatever, and I can address that too. It's not the intent to change anything. It was part of the transaction that happened in February of this year. When we got the survey back, we had R1 zoning. The buyer was concerned about not being in conformity with the zoning, and so as a contingent upon that transaction, Catholic Charities agreed to basically adjust the price to allow for the rezoning to take place so the buyer purchased a property that was in conformity. And that's really the intent. There's no intent to change the property at this point. It's going to be a two-building, multi-unit rental complex.
Well, if you received a copy of the letter as well, you might reach out to the
I'd be happy to.
protestant and let them know sort of
Sure.
what the deal is. Seems to me they were just seeking some information. Do you have any questions of our applicant, Commissioners? If not, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to recommend approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 8. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Items 9 and 10 have been continued. Item 11, C7065, preliminary plat of Robertson's Landing. That would be near the Indian Meridian, located west of North County Line Road and south of Northwest 122nd Street.
Good afternoon, Brad Reed with Crafts and Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard. This is a preliminary plat for a tract of land that had a comp plan amendment and a rezoning about a month ago. This is the corresponding preliminary plat. The staff TEs, we are fine with 1, 4, and 5. Number 2, it requests a variance. We don't want to request that. We'll put a stub to the south. And then number 3, it talks about it in the staff report a little bit. There's a creek that you can see that kind of comes down very hard. And so the creek comes down pretty hard. So the stub that we had actually coming from Nichols Creek, which we're also the engineers for that subdivision, that stub ran right into the creek. So we needed to shift that stub street down. So we can adjust the Nichols Creek plat to match the stub street as shown here. So that's the reason behind that. And it mentions that in the staff report as well. So we'll provide the stub, but we just need to move the location.
So you will provide a stub to the south?
Yes.
Just not in the same place?
The south, we don't have one on there. It's to the east. Our stubs aren't lining up there on that one. It's where the blue line is there. There's a creek, and we were just going to run right into it. So we just need to shift the one for Nichols Creek to the one that we're showing here.
Okay.
On the issue with the creek, I mean, obviously you've got, a road over the creek elsewhere. Can we not bridge it, or would it be running into an existing bridge?
Because of the way it comes down and then goes back north, we couldn't really provide that ability to bridge that. It would have to come down, and then we'd have to cross it again. So it kind of would be, it doubles back on itself almost, so.
Is there anybody here today that wanted to be heard on this item? Commissioners?
For the sake of clarity, so we don't need to make an adjustment or an amendment to the TE because you're going to meet it. You're just going to meet it differently.
Yes, we'll provide the stub. We just need to adjust Nichols Creek instead of this one. And like I said, we're doing the engineering on that job, so we've talked to the developer about that. He understands.
If there's no further discussion, given that the plat conforms with subdivision regulations, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Yeah, subject to the TEs.
To approve item number 11, subject to TEs. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 12 has been continued. Item number 13, PUD 1694, is an application by Gardner Capital to rezone 9700 Northwest Expressway from R1 to a PUD.
Commissioners, I'm going to recuse myself from the vote on this item.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is an application that no doubt looks familiar to you. It was an application that came before the commission sometime last year. I believe it was in December. And at the time, there was a conflicting vote. There was not enough votes to make a recommendation one way or the other, and so it actually went on to City Council with no recommendation. It was at that point that I was hired by the developer and asked to get involved, and so the first thing we did was schedule a neighborhood meeting with both the councilman as well as all the interested parties. At the time, what you're getting passed out now in front of you is a site plan. So what's worth noting, at the time, the site plan that we had didn't show the commercial along Northwest Highway. What you'll see now, it says proposed commercial development. At the time of the meeting, right there you'll see it on the screen. At the time of the meeting, again, the apartment portion of this development was all the way up to the frontage of Northwest Highway. It was suggested by some in the meeting that the application was a problem because it was only an apartment and it needed to have other uses. So we were tasked with what we perceived to be a task to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out a way to add additional uses so that this development wasn't just a multifamily project, but rather provided for a more holistic development that included commercial development along Northwest Highway. So what we came back with was what you see now before you, where you have the commercial along Northwest Highway. Behind that, you have the multifamily. It is worth noting that the comprehensive plan designation for this site is employment reserve. You do have a letter of objection from Mr. Groves in which he spends several pages discussing why this application is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So what I would ask you to do is to focus on the staff report and the professional planner's opinions as it relates to this application's conformance to the comprehensive plan. It may seem a bit odd to hear me talking about employment reserve in such a positive light, but when you look at what staff talks about in their staff report, they specifically address why multifamily is an appropriate use within an employment reserve designation. So if you think about what the employment reserve designation is trying to accomplish is some sort of large-scale employer. Well, one of the things you would need to have that is density, rooftops, people. And so this application provides that. There's commercial zoning that surrounds us, I believe, east and west. And along Northwest Highway, I think it is anticipated that you would likely see commercial development. At this spot where you have water and sewer, close access to the Turnpike just to the west, it's not likely that you would see single family or anything like that. It's more likely to be some sort of commercial development. So we provide cross-connectivity both east and west within our site plan that you can see on the image before you on the screen. You'll see the dark gray lines about halfway down that site plan. So we do provide vehicular connection to east and west. There is a TE that asks for pedestrian access to the common areas. We do agree to that. Mr. Groves also spends some time in his brief talking about parking. We have a very specific parking ratio that we include in the PUD that is based upon my client's experience over dozens and dozens of projects. But if that is a concern for Mr. Groves and this commission, we can commit to add a TE that we will meet the code requirements as it relates to parking. So what we have now is a PUD that allows for the commercial development along the frontage. We have, in addition, added commercial uses. And so what you have is a PUD that is squarely aligned with the comprehensive plan, which is why staff recommends approval. We attempted to make the changes that we believe we heard in the neighborhood meeting to provide the ability to have a more holistic development that included the commercial along with the multifamily. I understand that perhaps people just don't like apartments, but I don't think that's what is at issue today. What's at issue today is whether or not this development, as it's proposed and drafted, is compatible with the comprehensive plan, compatible with development patterns, and compatible with the infrastructure that's currently out there. I would submit that it is, which is why your staff has recommended approval of it. And again, we do agree to the technical evaluation. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I'm sure I'll be back up once Mr. Groves says his piece.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Only question I have is your agreement to add a potential TE number 2 as it relates to the parking requirements. That would be for the underlying zoning district. Is that correct?
Yes,
just
sir.
For whatever TP would require.
Or for that, I believe it would just be whatever the multifamily use required pursuant to the code is what we would need to meet.
Okay.
And we're fine with doing that if that is something the commission would like.
I just want to make sure I understood
Sure.
that for the purpose of the record. So thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. My name is Eric Groves. I'm an attorney. I'm leading the protest against this PUD. We're going to have several speakers. I thought I'd introduce them first and then wait for my turn. Yes, sir, Commissioner.
With all due respect today, let's try to be concise on the points. I think sometimes these can have a tendency to go on and on. And I'd just like to be respectful of everyone's time.
Sure. We have every intention of being concise, Commissioner. I want to start off with my colleague, Ami Swank, who will deal with some of the more technical aspects of the development, after which I will follow, and then my client. So, Ami?
I could get you to put up the second exhibit. What this exhibit is showing is the spacing between the current driveways that are currently existing on site and the proposed driveways. What you're being handed out currently is the Oklahoma City Functional Development Plan, which sets up certain requirements, one of which is driveway spacing. The driveway spacing, which you'll see in there, is if you look at, I believe it's going to be Table 3, that if you are on a expressway, which the Northwest Expressway is classified as an expressway in that plan, and if you would turn to the last page on that, I apologize, you'll see on there where it is classified as an expressway on there. If you then go to the requirements for expressway and adjacent driveways, you'll find that they should be spaced 250 feet apart. The proposed driveways you can see from there is approximately only 75 feet apart from the current driveway. In addition, they're supposed to be spaced an additional, I believe, 100 feet from driveways across the street. And the proposed driveway is going to be approximately almost in a line with Tractor Bob development, and he has already broken ground on that development. If you could put up for me Exhibits 4 and 5, just to let the commissioners see that ground has been broken on Tractor Bob. That's the pad, and then you can kind of see slightly off to the side a driveway, and if you'll go to, I believe it's going to be 5. You can see a little bit, that is taken from the driveway that's currently existing from our client's property, and you can see over there, the spacing for all the driveways currently are correct. And then if you'll go back to Exhibit 2, please. What you see here is that you would have it in violation of not only the driveway across the street, but the driveway beside it. Now, if some of you may be thinking, well, we don't have any authority over the Northwest Expressway, I submit to you, you do have authority for twofold reasons. You can go stricter. You can say you only can have a driveway, you can't have any driveways any closer than, in this example, 250. And so if the Department of ODOT said they could have a driveway, then you could actually say, okay, but it has to be further away. But in addition to that, Oklahoma City is going to be taking over this section of Northwest Expressway. I spoke to ODOT, and they did confirm that, and also Oklahoma City did confirm that. So you all do have authority on that. In addition, when you look at the plan, they indicate that if you do have frontage onto Northwest Expressway, that it is more important, that their preference is to have access going off of a dedicated road, so a one-way road. So if everybody's familiar with the Warwick Apartments, that's a good example of how they would prefer it to be done. I'll also submit to you that if you go down Northwest Expressway, you're not going to find any apartment complex that sole entry and exit is off of the Northwest Expressway. The only way to be able to get into this, in and out, is going to be through a 30-foot private drive. You're also, Mr. Box did mention the parking requirement. Currently, they're allotted for approximately 286 parking spaces. By code, they are supposed to have 360. That would be providing for 1.5 parking spaces for a one-bedroom and 2 parking spaces for a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So just to give you an idea, you would have 360 people attempting to get out of there relatively. If you ever tried to have it all at the same time, that'd be a disaster. If you were to just say 25% attempting to leave for work at the same time, if you were to line that number of cars up, it would stretch to the far boundary of their property and potentially loop around. So it is basically a disaster as far as people trying to get in or out. The scale is proposed to be 3 stories. There is not another 3-story structure within at least 1.5 miles to 2 miles. If you go to the code and for the building requirements for a technology park, if it abuts any R1 land, which this does, it's supposed to be restricted to 1 story. Clearly, this area is not restricted to 1 story. Just give me 1 second, make sure I covered everything. The other aspect is there is no public transportation available out here. There is no way to take a bicycle up or down Northwest Expressway out here. There are not even any sidewalks on the Northwest Expressway. So anybody who's going to live in this apartment, come and go from this apartment, they are going to have to be relying on transportation. And as far as taking any kids or anything, there would not be any means of a bus stop for any kids to get on and off of a bus. So when you look at it, just keep in mind that you're going to have everybody trying to come out of one entryway. I also would suggest you'd have a terrible issue if you had a fire and when everybody was attempting to get out. And in addition, the back of the parking, or in the back of the commercial, you're supposed to have access for loading and unloading of trucks. Don't believe they have enough space provided for that. If Northwest Expressway was ever expanded based on the parking and the lack of parking for the commercial, the city could be looking at buying a good chunk of that commercial property or having a major issue with the parking that would be left over. Thank you.
Any questions at this point, Commissioners? Go ahead.
Just a couple. The first one is, it's my understanding after meeting with the applicant that you all did have meetings with them. Is that correct? You all had meetings with the applicant? There were some neighborhood meetings with the applicant?
The initial meeting that took place, we had not been retained yet. We did sit down with Mr. Box this week. So when we were initially retained, all those meetings had already taken place to the applicant.
Okay. And so as far as the issues with the driveway and I guess the distances, have you all already recommended that it just be moved in order to comply with the issues that you've brought here? Is that the problem? Is that it just needs to be moved?
I don't know if actually moving the driveway I don't believe it would solve it, because even if you're talking about taking a 30-foot entry and flipping it to the other side, you're still going to have the remainder of the problems of not meeting, as far as the access onto the expressway and the flow of traffic and the safety issue. Does that answer your question?
I think.
I'm not trying to avoid it.
But I think then my next question is, so if there was just another, let's say it wasn't apartments, let's say it was just another commercial development that employed a lot of people in that space instead of being an apartment complex, wouldn't we have the exact same problem?
Actually, I did go back and I did watch and I saw you raise that question, and I thought it was a very good question. And I think it goes back to why they talk about when you develop an area, when they're trying to do it like an employment reserve, that it's holistic. I believe in the whole aspect of it. So if you were to take the whole area that's employment reserve and get roadways offset dedicated towards a one-way, a dedicated road in front of it to get the traffic off, to get it controlled that way, example in Warwick, to have other means of that, also being able maybe to flow on to, I believe it's Britain. I wouldn't swear to that. It's on the far other side of the employment area. But in my opinion, that's kind of when you're talking about doing it as a holistic deal. But I realize you're going to have that potential issue with everything. I don't necessarily think to the extreme density of this and developing your driveways better and having it all interconnected so it could flow out of other areas. Did that answer your question?
I think so. So I guess I'm wanting to, just in a nutshell, how could, from a traffic perspective, the applicant comply to the satisfaction of the people that you represent?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's only to the people that we represent. It's also to your own specifications of your own requirements and for what the city's requiring in their own functional plan that they're saying is necessary for safe flow of traffic.
I guess the reason why I'm making that statement is because it sounds like, I guess usually what we try to do is find a way to meet in the middle so that everyone can take some satisfaction in the way that we're moving forward. But I'm trying to find where that middle ground lies, and I'm still just not seeing that. And so I guess I'll stop.
Well, and
Well, if I can take one more.
I want to have one thing before you do.
Okay.
In regards to our own, city requirements, I mean, we've got our staff report, and I think our city staff has reviewed these same concepts and come to the conclusion that they are satisfied.
I would be curious how the staff accounted for a complete disregard of driveway spacing.
Well, we can hear from them.
Yeah.
Adjacent driveway separation is not ordinance, it's just policy, and they're still going to have to satisfy the state with any driveway permits that they get. They've got to get state permits.
Additional questions, commissioners? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Groves, as suggested earlier, in the essence of time, since you have a number of folks that are going to speak as well, let's try to limit those comments to less than 5 minutes if we can, so we can keep our hearing moving, okay?
I'll do my best. Commissioners, Eric Groves. As you all know, the comprehensive plan is required by statute in this state, and it also provides that municipal rules and regulations shall be made in accordance with that plan. The plan is not zoning. It is a guide. It is advisory. In this case, the plan that's in force now was the result of extensive community participation. Over 20,000 people contributed to the formation of that plan. It was approved by the Planning Commission and by the City Council. It does something that previous plans did not. It characterizes the most appropriate land use by means of a land use typology, which the plan calls a LUTA. The subject property sought to be rezoned today falls within a LUTA known as Employment Reserve. The origin of that LUTA grows out of a report that was submitted during the process of crafting the plan. It was done by the Chamber and by the Alliance for Economic Development. What that report showed was we don't have enough land within city limits to accommodate large employers, and we need to try to set some aside for that purpose if we want to attract them. The LUTA in question, Employment Reserve, does not contemplate apartments. It simply does not, with one exception. And if it's a large area, a total development, which the plan speaks of as 50 to 500 acres, and apartments are needed to be part of that, for lack of a better word, a campus, technology park, large industrial concern. Some people like to design things so that they live and work in the same area, as Chesapeake wanted to do. Then apartments may fit in, but not in this case. There is no such large holistic development planned, no manufacturing, no office industrial flex space, no warehousing, no distribution. All we have are isolated apartments and a little bit of commercial. These uses are usually, the ER use is usually to be located near a large thoroughfare like the Turnpike or the Expressway. So this is ideal for that kind of use, but not apartments. This application doesn't comply with the requirements for a PUD. A PUD is an ordinance, and it says that the PUD ordinance says that the PUD must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Consistent with the comprehensive plan. This one is not. Staff, I don't recall reading in the staff report where the staff said that it was consistent, but it let it go by. The staff just let it go by, and I think the staff is in error in this particular case, with all respect. The apartments are not appropriate except in a larger holistic development where other ER uses predominate. And the mere fact that the design statement says that underlying technology part regs will be enforced doesn't make it any better. I think what this gets down to is this comprehensive plan is a community effort. It's not my plan. It's the work of a lot of people over a long period of time. You are the stewards of that plan. If you approve this development, you might as well abandon the plan. This application, more than any I've seen in many years, threatens the integrity of the planning process in this city. This is an aberration. You really should not approve this. If you want to show respect for the comprehensive plan, this is an opportunity to do it. If you want to disrespect the comprehensive plan, you have that opportunity as well. So thanks very much. That's as concise as I can be. My client, Dennis Trepanier, will be next.
Mr. Groves, before you go, are there any questions for the commissioners of Mr. Groves at this time?
Yep.
Sir.
The first one, it's my understanding that you all met with the applicant and that initially, and maybe this is accurate, when we first voted on this issue, the entire piece of property was to be an apartment. Is that correct?
That's the understanding, but as my associate said to you, when these meetings with the community occurred, we were not representing the protestants.
Oh, okay.
Kelly Work was.
Okay.
So we understand the meeting occurred. We were not present. We met with David Box, as we customarily do, to discuss this, but we did not have a neighborhood meeting since we've been retained.
Okay. And since that meeting, okay, so since this application moved on to the City Council, it's my understanding that this commercial development was added in order to comply with, to better comply with the employment reserve. Why doesn't that satisfy the requirements?
It doesn't comply at all, Commissioner. It doesn't comply even remotely. If you look at what that typology requires, it says land in the employment reserve should ideally be between 50 and 500 acres and be a typology park, a manufacturing concern. Think Amazon Fulfillment Center, something like that. And where there's a lot of work, it's to stimulate employment, to bring in large employers. When one does that, those folks need a place to live. And so apartments can be appropriate in a larger holistic setting like that, but this doesn't even remotely approach that. All this is just putting a little commercial in front of apartments. This was originally filed as apartments. That's what they have in mind. They put in a little commercial that doesn't at all comply with what the comprehensive. All you have to do is read the plan. So for the sake of just clarity, if there was more of this property that was dedicated to commercial in addition to the apartments, then it would be in compliance, in your opinion? Absolutely not. What has to be, to comply with the plan, this has to be one of the uses that's enumerated in the employment reserve. And as I pointed out in my brief, those uses are manufacturing concerns, office industrial flex space, warehousing, distribution centers. That's what the plan says. It doesn't include apartments. There's an exception if you have all those other things. Then apartments may be necessary and would be appropriate. But just putting it in a little commercial doesn't comply in the least. This is a masquerade, folks. That's why you shouldn't approve it. This is lipstick on a pig. That's all it is.
Thank you very much. We have somebody else that's signed up to speak. As you said, Mr. Trepanier, would you like to speak at this time, sir? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience. Dennis Trepanier, 9320 Northwest Expressway. Yukon, Oklahoma, and we're in protest to this. I'd like to back up just a little bit, be brief. This is actually the third time in front of y'all. We've also been at the City Council. To put things in context, there was a meeting after we left this chamber and headed for the council. There was a meeting called, a unilateral meeting called by Mr. Box, which some of us attended. His agenda was to explain some way to facilitate. There was no recommendation from any of the protestants that commercial solve the problem. That's something that he inserted. And as a result of that, they wouldn't hear it at the council. It was a last-minute change. What it ultimately resulted in is us being remanded back to the Planning Commission to start this trip all over again. This is the 5th Planning Commission report. And just so you know, the first two Planning Commission staff reports, the first two staff reports at least took the time to define entry into this property. That happened on 9/13 and 9/27. On 11/8 and 12/13, the staff report amended that to just a single divided entry, but also specifying width of the drives. They actually looked at that and responded to some of the concerns. This last time around, it's just the only requirement is just to have 2 access points, just 2 access points. So this idea that we're in compliance or we felt that our needs were being met, that's Mr. Box's idea. And the 2 entries, as you can see, one's into the commercial, and both of them are minimal size, 30 feet. So, and I won't, cover back over the items that were covered by Ami. The only other issue I just really want to impress upon you, and I had these same comments before, is the amount of traffic that flows back and forth from Northwest Expressway. This is a very active and growing area. It is not uncommon for every single day to have traffic backed up from the intersection all the way back to my building, which we are the building on the east side. That's every day. And in the morning time, it's very difficult without any additional traffic of this nature to be able to pull out and move forward. Their apartment complex is a cart before the horse. The synergistic idea that this is going to develop, here we are putting an apartment complex right in the middle, separating all at least our track and the larger track without any thought on how people are going to get into or out of. There's no center median here. There's no access. There's no decel lanes or accel lanes. There's not even enough width in the highway to put those in. It will be some time before all that happens. So those are the only things I really want to go back over. I appreciate your time and thanks for your patience. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them.
Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, I do. I feel like typically whenever we have protests on an item, there's kind of 2 approaches. There's those that come in and cut to the chase of what they're concerned about, and then there's the ones that come in and focus on legal aspects of ways to try to stop a development without really telling us what the concern is. And I feel like, and maybe I'm just interpreting things here, but I don't know what the core issue is. I know you guys don't want apartments here, but I can't tell truly how apartments in this location negatively affects your ownership of adjacent properties or your businesses.
Well, as we just indicated, it's definitely a cart before the horse. If this area is going to develop out there, you're putting in a monolithic structure right in the middle with, it's going to exacerbate access. Now, if another commercial, and you guys brought up another commercial type operation, it wouldn't have the massive inflow ingress egress that an apartment complex is going to have. This came out as a technology park. It should have been an R4. In all honesty, it was an R4 to start with, but it wasn't. It was because the staff recommended technology park. Well, does this look like a technology park? No, it doesn't.
But how does it negatively affect your ownership?
I thought I just answered that. I mean, we have a massive.
I'm not sure you did either.
Okay.
I mean, very respectfully, I echo his comment. I'm trying to figure out ultimately what the concern is, because some of the other folks that have spoken today have indicated, well, if there was a driveway here, all this traffic's going to be coming and going. Sir, I live at Council and Memorial Road.
So you're
at 5 o'clock every day, Paycom opens up its gates and hundreds of people pour out. I don't go home at 5 o'clock, thank goodness. But for those that try, you have to wait an hour to get through that traffic. Now, after that, it's fine. But the idea that a commercial use or an office use is going to change the traffic here is just completely, it's just not accurate. It's not true. You're going to have the same traffic concerns. The other thing that I just can't seem to understand, again, and I think it goes to the confusion of the issue, is one curb cut is a byproduct of the size of this lot. You have multiple owners up and down this parcel, it's up and down this stretch of road. It's not as if one owner has the entirety of this overlay that falls within the employment reserve where they can just go cut curbs along Northwest Expressway wherever ODOT and the city will allow. They're limited to the size of this tract. So I really wish you would just tell us what about this application for you is so damaging or is so inappropriate, especially given that we're talking about Northwest Expressway, which if we were talking about a non-primary corridor that is designed to carry traffic in and out of areas east and west across the city, I probably would be more inclined to be sensitive to. But if we didn't put this here, where would we put it from an infrastructure perspective?
Well, I can't answer to where you would put it at, but I can't answer your arrangement about Paycom is not the same. That's a one-lane road. And yes, it does bottleneck over there. As a matter of fact, it bottlenecks to the point where they built a brand-new road all the way around the backside.
Well, they're working to build a road.
Okay, well, same thing. So the traffic was not addressed at that time, and it turned into be a total mess. And it is a mess, and you know it's a mess.
Yep.
So, right. So this is going to be the same situation. There are no capacity to handle this kind of traffic at that point. So it's going to be a total mess.
But this is what happens with development.
Well, I understand, and I have the 10 acres to the east, and I'm hoping as we have some control, or as people look at how this is going to develop, that we can expand this area out here in some progressive way, that it won't become a single spot where all of a sudden it's like, oh, don't go down there, you'll never get out of that place. I mean, that whole idea of not being able, just like you've indicated, you don't even go home that way. So this will be the same thing. Oh, don't go that way because you'll never be able to get home because there'll be so many people getting out. That's the same situation that I think is getting ready to happen here. And
I would tell you, I think part of the problem with Memorial Corridor is that it's 2 lanes and 1 way. I would tell you I'm not a traffic engineer, but I would tell you that from my perspective. I'm telling you that this is the intersection, basically the intersection of the Kilpatrick Turnpike and Northwest Expressway. 2 of the most major pieces of highway infrastructure in the city. And that's what got me hung up the last time, was if this infrastructure is supportive of large-scale employment, it is certainly supportive of 168 apartments. I just can't get beyond that for me personally. Well, I was very hopeful to hear from you, as Commissioner Highsmith tried to drive out, what is really the issue with these apartments, because I just don't buy the traffic. I just don't buy it.
Yeah. Well, we definitely...
And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, Mr. Trevani. I'm just asking for...
That's okay. And it is not in the intersection. It's a third of a mile back. And all the cars by that time are doing 55 miles an hour. You could have put it a half mile down. The traffic impact is going to be the same. Yeah. You're going to have large trucks parked out there. Nobody can stop on that. I mean, everybody's going to have to stop on the highway and turn in. It is a poor design.
I understand. I think we understand the issue at this point. Are there other questions beyond traffic that anybody has at this time? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Mr. Groves, that's the only other person that signed up to speak. I don't know if there's other people, but I want to make sure, is there anybody else on your side that you'd like to be heard before I ask the audience if anybody else would like to be heard?
Commissioner, I understood there will be a representative of Tractor Bob's here, but maybe not.
Just you. I'm going to ask the audience if there's anyone here that would like to be heard.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have anybody signed up to speak. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard on this matter today? Seeing none, Mr. Box, if you want to come up and give us a minute or so of...
Sure. So on the curb cuts, if it's important to the commission, my client's certainly willing to limit it to 1, if that's something that's important to the commission. We understand at some point perhaps we'll need to, at building permit stage or a specific plan, line it up with existing drives. You understand that when these site plans were produced, I don't think they had broken ground on Tractor Bob's north of us. So in closing, I think everybody on this commission is aware that the staff is very protective of the comprehensive plan. I mean, so much so that normally when I'm standing up here, we're perhaps butting heads on the plan and whether or not applications conform to it. And so for Mr. Groves to argue that they just blew it or they just missed it, I think is probably not accurate. I mean, they usually, comb over these things with a fine-tooth comb, and perhaps we disagree, but I think this is wholly supported by the comprehensive plan, which is why they recommended approval of the application. So with that, any other questions you might have, happy to answer.
I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box, but I've heard the word holistic and 500 acres, but we're talking about a 12-acre piece of land here and a 500-acre owned by how many different people that pie in the sky someday somebody's going to drop something down there and this. And where does this 12-acre guy come into play 25 years from now when this still hasn't happened yet?
Yeah. I'm not going to speak for the commission that was present the first time the case was heard. What I'll tell you from my recollection was that there was a lot of that discussion regarding the comprehensive plan and whether or not the intent of the comprehensive plan was to say this whole area should be holistically developed or that each application that comes forward should be holistic within itself. That was a debate that was had at that time. It was discussed. Mr. Bennett, I don't think you were on the commission. I don't think you were here for that discussion either, Commissioner Hinkle, but that was the discussion. That's an unknown factor. And what I would say, at least from my seat on the commission, is that as we've had many, many conversations about, with all due respect to Mr. Groves, that's why this commission exists. The comprehensive plan was a plan. It's not perfect. It's not zoning. It's not the law. It's a plan. And sometimes things come before us that require us to amend that plan, and we do so with respect for the fact that we didn't create the plan, we didn't draft the plan. Candidly, I didn't participate in its creation, but I'm asked to uphold it to the degree that I believe that I should. So those discussions took place, but there was never an answer that anybody could give because I wasn't there. I don't know if you were, but I wasn't. So I don't know what the answer is. Other questions of the commission or from the commission for anybody here?
My one take on this one, and I'm probably wrong, but my guess is whenever I look at the protest letters, it's a lot of the surrounding properties. And if I remember correctly, it's a lot of the same family. And I think that there's an ownership group that has a lot of land around this. And what might be, what my just wild guess is here is that having a development in the middle of a lot of land that they've tried to aggregate is stopping the potential for bigger ideas. And if that's the case, I just don't, well, even if it's not the case, I think that this, to me, this project is compliant with all the things that I consider as a planning commissioner. And unless, well, more comment.
Oh, I just have a question. It was from Mr. Grove's letter. There's a comment in here that this is 100% legal protest. Every property owner within an 800-foot radius opposes the project and has signed letters against it. Curious if the city staff knows if that's true. Do we have signed letters by every
commissioner? If I
may.
Okay. The actual figure for 800 feet is 97% protest.
Okay.
The amount of protests 300 feet is 100%. You go out 800 feet, it's 97%.
And approximately how many different owners are we talking about? I did look at Exhibit A, and I don't know what's 300 feet and 400
Well, customarily,
feet. How many?
when you have to go out beyond 300 feet, it's 12. Exhibit 1 will show that.
Exhibit A?
Here we go.
Oh, okay.
If we can move that up, well, there we go. The inner circle, it's not a circle really, it's sort of an oval. The inner circle is 300 feet out. The subject property is the one with the white with the hash marks.
Right.
And you can see 300 feet out. And then the outer rim is 800 feet out. We could count the number of property owners, but the ordinance provides that if you can't get 12 property owners within 300 feet, you go out far enough so that you can. So I'm going to say it's 12. Yes, and there are some larger landowners here.
So to make sure I understand that, inner circle, it's everyone in the smallest circle?
That's 300 feet out from the subject property.
And the second circle, it's all but one?
It's 800 feet out from the subject property.
Okay.
The ordinance requires notice, to everybody within 300 feet, but if there's not at least 12 landowners, then you have to go out further until you can get 12 landowners.
So my next question is, maybe you can answer, but I was going to pose to the city staff. Your comment in the letter is that because, as a consequence, the city council can only approve it by a supermajority vote, 7 of 9. I'm curious if that's true at city council, and regardless of that, is there any special requirement for our planning commission?
No. The statute that allows protest requires the municipal legislature, the only body that has the power to zone, to approve, where there's more than 50% protest, to approve it by a 7 out of 9 vote. That statute doesn't apply to the planning commission, only applies to the council. And Mr. Brummett will, I think, affirm this. If we file our protest petition, which we have, within 3 days of the council meeting, and there's more than 50% protest, then the council must have a supermajority vote to zone it. That's 7 out of 9.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners have comments or questions?
I think I've made mine in the last 3 times we've heard it. I was for it before and for it now. It's right next to a turnpike and a state highway. It seemed like a really good place.
Just quickly, I mean, I have a hard time understanding how we can respect the rights of property owners in the employment reserve and at the same time respect the idea of the employment reserve being set aside for there to be these large-scale property developments. It seems to me it's really highly speculative to say no to everything that is to these developments where there's a specific plan, a specific idea, people willing to risk their capital and put it on the line, and then for us to just say no because one day, hopefully, there will eventually be a bigger development that might one day prop up. And so you can't fully use your property because one day we might have this development that we're thinking about. It just seems very unfair to the property owner.
May I be heard on that?
Just a minute, please.
Highly speculative, and that's why I can't. Why I'm going to be in support of this.
I think we're going to see more issues like this. We've seen them before. I think that's why we're here. I think that we've had other instances where these applications have come forward with employment reserve overlays, and I think that is the challenge, and it's a balance between, in my view, it is a balance between the rights of the property owner, right, to be able to develop that property, and respecting the reality that as a city we are charged with being able to create and implement a long-range plan that brings a lot of other factors into play. By way of comparison, we had an application come forward earlier today on a plat that was a part of an application that originally started as a amendment of the comprehensive plan to remove it from employment reserve. And what I continue to be bothered by, and that I wish someone would address, that, and we don't have this authority, is that you had a neighborhood next to the application I'm referring to was employment reserve next to a neighborhood. It was not zoned for commercial use. It was zoned for AA. If the applicant had come forward and asked for a commercial zoning and brought forward that rezoning application and brought it to us, there is no doubt that the neighborhood outpouring of dissent would have been gigantic. But those people don't know because they weren't noticed. They aren't noticed of comprehensive plan amendments. And so there's no way for the public to be aware of these overlays and what's happened, and that land has been reserved for these uses. And then when you have somebody come forward with a use that makes sense, that's what we're charged to do. And I think that's what we're charged to do here. And I agree with Commissioner Privett's comments, and I agree with your comments. I can't find anything here that tells me that there is anything different about this application that doesn't respect my interpretation of what the comprehensive plan set to do, and certainly what the use and density of this property is going to create on the Kilpatrick Turnpike, Northwest Expressway, and all this other stuff. Our city staff report should have provided other concerns they had that didn't have it. I am bothered that this application came up as a technology park because I don't know that I understand that. And I don't think that that was the right thing to do. But if it were an R4 application, my opinion wouldn't change. And objectively, that's how I look at it. So with that, if there's any other discussion, I'm going to take a motion.
Can I just answer the question that Commissioner Pennington raised?
Quickly.
Very quickly. I think this discussion is a totally legitimate discussion. These are the issues that are raised. But there is an answer to it. It's a very simple answer. Amend the plan. amend the plan. There's a process in the plan to amend it. Staff even has a form you can fill out. If you're going to have an application like this, you have to amend the plan.
We're going to see one later today. That wasn't before us. If it were before us, I would be in support of it, is where I am today. And so as a result of that, I can support the application objectively. Commissioners, I'm ready for a motion unless anybody has other comments.
Make a motion to recommend approval of PUD 1694.
Second.
I have a motion and approval, a motion and a second to recommend approval for PUD 1694. Please cast your votes, please. Commissioner Pennington, would you please flip my light to green? And the application is approved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, item number 14 is a comprehensive plan amendment, second one in 2019, consideration of a proposed amendment changing the land use topology area from urban low to urban reserve in an area located north of Southwest 59th and east of Sarah Road. And we have a presentation from Susan Atkinson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about this comprehensive plan amendment. Again, the request is to remove or lift the urban reserve land use designation from the base urban low. And there are two associated applications with this item, a PUD 1724 and a preliminary plat, which is C7061, the plat, excuse me, preliminary plat of Bixby Canyon. Next slide. So just generally in the city, this is in the southwest corner of the city, touching the Mustang city limit. In terms of existing conditions, this subject parcel is part of a larger area that has been designated urban reserve because it has not yet been served with city services, utility and water and sewer. And it is also in a rural response time area. So it was part of a larger area that you can see with the green dotted hash that was not quite ready for urbanization at the time of the plan's adoption. This is just a slide of the subject parcel zoning and the surrounding areas. As you can see, it is an undeveloped part of town at this point, surrounded by undeveloped land. Again, I said that during the zoning slide, but that's just another view of the fact that at the moment, this is an undeveloped part of the city. As I said when we started talking, the area is not yet served with water and sewer, and this is just a slide that demonstrates that. And this is a slide that demonstrates the sewer capacity. It is, however, in an open sewer shed. So, with regard to the applicant's proposal, water will be extended to this site from extending southward from Southwest 44th along Sarah Road, and that's the yellow line on the slide. And as I said, with regards to wastewater, the area is in an open sewer shed, and the applicant proposes to extend sewer to the site and connect to the City of Oklahoma City wastewater utility system. There are a number of capital projects going on in the area, many of them under construction, some of them funded and not yet under construction. Primarily, these are street widenings and arterial resurfacing. And then there is also a very large turnpike extension you may be familiar with that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority has under construction right now. With regard to emergency services, the subject site is about 5 miles southwest of Oklahoma City Fire Station 33, about 4 miles, southeast, 4 miles southwest of Fire Station 20, and about 2.5 miles north of Mustang's fire station. Oklahoma City and Mustang have an automatic aid agreement in place for fire service calls. So with regard to why this area was originally designated urban reserve, again, it was outside of water and wastewater service provision. It met rural response targets for fire service, for emergency services. The prevailing development pattern in the area at the time the plan was adopted was overwhelmingly undeveloped and rural, and to some extent that is still true, but things are beginning to change. This is an area, and this is true in areas designated UR throughout the city, that provides the city an opportunity to increase service levels over time and responsibly manage the cost of doing so. And in doing so, that always allows the base use, in this case urban low, to remain in place, which allows lots of different land uses, including residential. So with regard to our analysis and findings in this particular application, utilities are being extended from the north, both water and sewer. As we've said several times, it falls within the urban response time target for the fire department. There is low-density residential development happening in the area, present in the area both to the south and the west. The Turnpike Extension is a major project, obviously, that will have a large impact on the future of the area. And Sarah Road, which is the eastern edge of the site, is scheduled for widening. So it would be staff's recommendation that the Commission approve the application to remove urban reserve, the urban reserve designation, and we're proposing an expanded boundary in this particular case, which is indicated in the blue above the subject site, which is pink. And the reasons for that are this. The applicants are extending utility services from the north, which will go right by the quarter section north of the subject property. So it would make a lot of sense to go ahead and lift urban reserve in this case and allow that adjacent parcel or parcels to begin to urbanize. Again, this meets the test of it's ready. We said this is in an open sewer shed, so that makes providing those services to all kinds of development in the area easier, not cheaper, but easier. And then again, there are significant transportation improvements that are either underway or already approved in the area, some of them funded by Better Streets, Safer Cities. And then, of course, we've talked about the Turnpike Extension. So I'll be glad to answer any questions the Commission might have.
Commissioners, I want us to give us just a little bit of thought to the question of whether we think it's appropriate to widen the area of activity here, where we are lifting, if we choose to do that at all, I guess. For me, I think it makes sense in this case. Staff seems to feel that it's appropriate for the additional area as well as this area the idea that we're going to wait for someone to come along with a development proposal before we do it just doesn't seem to me to, there's no advantage to it that I can see, but I don't want us to take that step without at least giving it some thought.
Chairman Powers, may I add one more thing that I wanted to say, and it's kind of important. Staff is right now in plans for updating Plan OKC, studying all the UR designated areas throughout the city, and they're doing that in concert with the utility department. So all of these citywide are being re-examined for their readiness for urbanization, but I wanted to make sure the commission knew that. Sorry.
Do you have any idea when you're going to be ready to bring those forward? Will they be brought forward as a block or in bits and pieces here and there?
Planning Director, do you know that?
It'll be brought forward as a block in a few months. We have an initial draft ready right now that we're working through.
Okay.
And in regards to looking at these, are we also re-examining the chapter in our Plan OKC that examined the development pattern and our thoughts on those three options that were studied?
The growth scenarios?
Correct.
What we hadn't anticipated re-examining the kind of the theory, I guess, behind Plan OKC, the growth scenarios, but what we do intend to do is look at where these areas are appropriate to serve, and also look at there's a section in there that looks at the amount of land we have, and that's part of the equation. You know, we don't necessarily need, we don't want to have too much land because that can lead to inefficiencies and growth and fiscal problems. We want to have the right amount so that the market can do its thing and work efficiently. So that is one of the things that we would like to update, make sure we have enough land but not too much so that we allow development to be, out in the hinterlands and inefficient.
Okay.
No one has any thoughts they want to share on the topic of expanding the boundary of the area?
My thoughts were embodied in the question. I think we've got to continue to consider our growth pattern as a city, and in particular the fiscal issues that come along with that. But it's a really big question, and I'll honestly say I'm not sure how we consider that on an individual case basis. I think this seems like kind of one of those opportunities, if we're looking at all UR designations, that we do have potentially an opportunity to really decide where we stand, but I think it's still a very complicated issue.
Let me just say that the comprehensive plan, the growth scenario that was selected when we did the public outreach and the surveys, was the most, I guess, I would say aggressive, or I'm not sure the word, but in terms of efficiency. And so it's, I think the plan is there, just in the way, as you say, that we execute it, in the way we implement it, which of course we're going to be doing through the code update and through other means.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion, then I'll take a motion.
Well, this area is by far the fastest growing area of Oklahoma City, far west Oklahoma City. I think there are two resolutions here we need to vote on separately. Is that correct, Chairman Powers?
I think there are alternative resolutions, if I understand. Is that right?
That's correct.
So it's one or the other.
Resolution A would be the expanded area that Susan mentioned, the area in blue.
Okay, well, I move that we adopt Resolution A, removing the URL.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution expanding what am I trying to say? Approving the proposed map amendment to the comprehensive plan, changing the land use typology from urban low intensity and urban reserve to urban low intensity. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
I further move approval of Resolution B, removing the URL from
No, so this is the alternative. If we didn't approve A, then we would be considering B. So we don't need to take any action on this. Correct? Am I right about that?
Oh, so
we're good.
I approved A and B in my first motion.
I'm sorry?
So we don't need to approve B, we approved
Right.
A and B in my
That's
first.
right.
Okay,
Thank you.
The next two items are related to the last item, items 15 and 16. Item 15, PUD 1724, application by Sedona Lakes LLC to rezone 5600 South Sarah Road from RA to PUD 1724.
Is the applicant present?
Good afternoon, Brad Reed, Crafton Toll, 300 Point Parkway Boulevard. Richard McCowan and Zach Roach from Ideal Homes are here with me as well. So a little bit of backstory on this is the developer that I'm representing purchased this land, and we were coming through with R1 zoning for it. We had a preliminary plat that actually was coming through. Ideal Homes actually is in contract to buy these lots, and they came back in with a specific plan for a subdivision that met the requirements that they would like to see. So we came back through with the PUD. The PUD, the variation that we added was a slight lowering in the depth on the size. It was basically 50 by 115s instead of 50 by 120s for our lot size. This will allow us to provide these large areas of common area in the middle, these green belts that they wanted to see for use behind for drainage and amenities for their residents. So that was kind of the purpose behind the PUD, and that's the reason why we came in with that, with the variation to the lot size. I'm actually going to let them talk on a few things because there's two things on here on the TEs that are actually let's talk on item 1. Item B, a substreet should be provided to the property at the corner of Southwest 59th and Sarah Road. We're providing substreets to the east and to the north. There's a 20-acre or 15-acre site. There's a house there where it says Sarah Road in the AA section. There's one house there, and that guy actually has some cattle. So it's basically one property user. That's why we left the stub street out of there. It's not a large section of land. We didn't want to feel like we're intruding onto, one person's property. So that's why there's no stub street there.
How large is that corner, Brad?
They believe it's 15 acres.
But it's still on the hard corner of Sarah and 59th. So the idea that we're creating a connection to future residential's probably pretty unlikely.
I believe so. I believe it probably would be commercial if something does go there. Like I said, there's where the AA is. He has a fairly large house. It's there right now.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm gonna let them speak on item A for this one.
Richard McCowan, 30 Northeast 2nd Street, Oklahoma City. Zach, if you could hold this up a bit. What we do when we're trying to create a walkable neighborhood that gives everybody this kind of incredible freedom to turn their kids loose to go wander around in the greenbelt space. We look at the neighborhood as a whole. We're going to be coming in here to this community with 3 different price points of houses, and there's a lot of complexity in making all of that work in terms of putting the neighborhood together in a way that you've got one comprehensive idea lot size here, 60-foot lots, that an appraiser can come in and understand that as a defined unit. And he can look at a house within that group and say, okay, these houses are selling at, $245 a square, or $145 a square foot. I've got my downtown hat on for the moment there.
Get your suburban hat back on.
Yeah, sorry. Out here, they're much more reasonably priced. Or the portion to the north as a defined component. So when we get into these issues around needing to make lots larger because of adjacent use, we don't even know how to make that work in terms of tying a comprehensive neighborhood together that works as a unit. Be happy to answer any questions regarding that, but that's maybe
How large are the lots on that?
Okay, they are 250 square feet smaller than the 6,000 feet required, so 5875 or 750. No, 5750. Thank you, Zach. They didn't teach math where I went to school. I draw pictures.
So let me ask staff, what is the basis of this request? Why are we wanting them to do this? It doesn't look to me like there's anything next door. Am I right?
You talking to the stub on the west or the east?
Along the east boundary.
On the east boundary, there's a PUD that's been approved that has, I think, 2.5 acre size lots. But larger lot PUD.
So there is a PUD that is in place for that. It's half-acre lots. We've actually been in contact with the engineer for that job. And with us extending sewer down there, there's the possibility that they're going to look at the fact that if they have sewer, the half-acre is no longer necessary. I'm not saying that this is something that's coming through, but they are going to. If we're extending sewer right next to them. And so it falls away from them a little bit. It kind of goes to the east, but they're going to look at the possibility of coming in and putting in some just R1 single family in there.
Okay. So explain to me what the variation in size is here throughout the...
We do have a group of lots. Come closer, Zach, so I can still talk in the microphone and point. We do have a group of lots here that are, actually the line goes all the way over. Sorry, I should have brought my coloring pens and made sense out of this. But there's a defined group that are 60 foot wide, and that'll be for our signature series houses. They are slightly larger. It's usually kind of the third time home buyer, once the third child comes along, that kind of thing. Yeah, Zach, there you go. Zach lives in a signature series neighborhood.
There's a rule smart people follow on that. It's one kid per hand and never more than that. You know that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then as we come up here, this is our classic series, and it actually stops at this group. And what we try and do is back up the two series at the backyard fence. And then everything wrapping this direction will be our Camden series. So our smallest houses are up here in our classic series. Very often it's a young couple, kids on the way. One of our when people are living downtown, their number one forwarding address is our Valencia community, and they're buying in our classic series most often. And also we sell a handful to first-time home buyers in the Camden series, slightly bigger houses, but also not that much more in terms of the difference in lot size. What we wanted to do when we first took a look at this, there was, to try and create some meaningful open space. We certainly were working with a pipeline constraint here on the south. We did find a good spot to make a significant play field. We can actually get a full-size soccer field in that area. We've got some slope we're going to have to work with, but Zach's really great at building incredible sports facilities. And then the other thing that's really exciting is sort of as you come home every day, we really try and bring you to a playground and an amenity zone, and the view down this hill is going to be fantastic. And it's kind of the moment where you show up and you're like, the stress goes out of your body, and you're like, this playground, I should go get the kids and go for a walk, etc. It really is how we do it. And when we're building these neighborhoods, our job is to create that proverbial moment where the family looking to buy a home, mom and dad pull up and the two kids lean forward and they see this giant playground equipment that we create, and they go, "Can we live here?" Job done. They're going to move into our neighborhood. And in the down market we've been in the last 2.5 years here in Oklahoma City, our sales have actually, we're coming into our third record year for sales. And it is by and large, part of it's our guaranteed utility bills, our super energy efficient houses, part of it's our customer service. But part of it, and I'm not to pat myself on the back, but part of it, our team builds neighborhoods that people feel comfortable turning their kids loose and letting them go play. And that, we didn't really know that was going to be something we were going to figure out. But today, I mean, people are terrified to let their kids go ride their bike on the sidewalk in the front yard because they're afraid, you know, the neighbor next door is going to back over them in an SUV. We see that in car commercials. Here, people, because this fence all along the open space is a 4-foot social fence, it's like usually a split rail with vinyl coated chain link. Everyone can see what's going on back there. And you end up with the neighbors gathering back there, getting to know one another. And it's really an amazing antidote to the suburban isolation that we all know about and hear of. And that would be the same thing, you know, all backing up to all the major green spaces. Anyway, we're trying to create great places for people to raise families.
That
Are
is
you ready
great.
to buy? Are you in the market? You look like you might be in the market.
All I'm sitting here thinking to myself is, you know there's only 4 people at home watching this, and none of them are in the market for a home. So I don't know if you're trying to sell houses to us or these fine people, but we get it. They're going to be spectacular.
That is a great story. As I look at this on paper, it is very dense. It is a lot to take in. There is this central green space, but the rest of the green space is very peripheral. It seems like a long way from those lots at the very top to the middle. I like the fact that there is some variation in lot size. It is part of our plan policy to encourage that variation, both in price point and size and so forth. And it's hard to do if you're doing it, you know, a whole neighborhood at a time. So the fact that there is that variation within the neighborhood, I like. I'm not quite so crazy about the fact that there's not more scattered green space, I guess. Although, frankly, as the mother of 2 children who are now way too young to worry about playing outdoors, but the idea of having that space where they're visible and you can have eyes on them and so can other people is very appealing. I have a little bit of concern about the minimum lot size. I have a little bit of concern about the lot coverage. I have a little bit of concern about the front yard setbacks. And I have a little bit of concern about the facade regulations being varied from our usual 70-30 to a 65-35. So all of those things are on my mind. Did you want to take a shot at any of them?
Well, it's a lot there. So one of the things that, again, I wish we would have colored this up a little bit better. We do have some entry points into the common areas, and a lot of what goes on back here are actually wet detention ponds, and those are an important amenity. Both they're doing their job from a flood control standpoint, but every time we have a nice day, you know, kids are out with their fishing pole. It's like a magnet bringing them out into the community, and so we've intentionally created, you know, views onto those areas as often as possible. A good example here, it's maybe even easier on your screen, you know, the way these streets open out onto the open space as opposed to turning back and having all the lots just back up onto the open space. So we've created as many of those windows as possible, especially as you're coming home from the south side along 159th. You know, we're again aiming and reminding you at the, you know, go kick a soccer ball around or baseball or whatever it is we end up building there. The coverage ratio, we've certainly requested higher coverage ratios in previous PUDs. I remember reading that and going, is 65% all we're asking for? So I think, again, when you look for the flexibility, the average house that gets built in here won't cover that much. But occasionally, you get the family that's like wants the 4-bedroom version, and so we've got to make that flexibility. In the aggregate, we really won't end up covering everything at 65%, especially given, the open space as it has its offsetting aspects to that.
Well, you're also not making an allowance for things like ephes or stucco or things of that nature are not scheduled out in your architectural facades, right?
Zach Rose, 1320 North Porter. We had included that, I believe, in the 35% request. One of the things we're seeing with the market is the craftsman style home is becoming increasingly popular. And so as we submit this plan, we're trying to make sure that not only are we addressing the needs now, but as we go forward. And so cementation support, I believe, is a part of that 35% request that we'd asked for.
Right, but ephes is not. You got cement board, but you don't have ephes.
Yeah, and I would have to defer to my production guys on that. That was the specific language that they'd asked me to include in this one.
Got it. Well, that's something that we typically see included, is my point, which, I'm not going to, if it's in the code and it's allowed, I'm not going to design it for you. But to me, that's an inferior product. You guys have taken some of that stuff out. You don't have that scheduled. You don't plan to use vinyl siding. That's not shown. I mean, so cement board and cement-based siding products and masonry is essentially what you're using on your facade.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask what is going to sound like a trick question, but it's a honest question? What do we believe is the point of having minimum lot sizes in the first place?
I think that's probably a better question for staff than for the applicant.
But our PUD basically says we'll have a minimum lot size of 2750 or 5750.
Sure. I mean, I'll throw it to staff on that too. I mean, it's a legitimate question. I'm curious. I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm just curious why the city feels it's necessary to codify a minimum lot size.
That is a great question for our code update process coming up. I wasn't here when we did the 6,000 square foot. It's pretty standard, a lot of communities, and I think I would say that mostly it's that people come to expect that as kind of a minimum, as kind of a certain amount of open space, a certain amount of privacy, a certain amount of space between your neighbors. People typically expect that as a minimum. So oftentimes when we go smaller than that, you kind of want to make sure that the design is there, that that we mitigate that. So through the design of the homes, through the layout of the lots, and so forth. So I think there are a lot of other reasons why lot sizes are regulated, but that's at least part of it.
Staff clearly doesn't have an issue with the lot size that's proposed because they're recommending approval in the application. And
absolutely.
If they're going to slap 659 lots in the dirt in southwest Oklahoma City, they apparently believe very confidently, as you're seeming to allude, that there's probably a market for that.
Well, and that's, honestly, I should have initially directed it at staff. I guess my question in reviewing these a lot of times is like, shouldn't lot size come down to allowing the market to decide rather than us as a city having a standard minimum lot size in our zoning? I'm just always curious about that, and that's why I just was looking for a response.
I love the question, and I am very committed to volunteering as much time as necessary to work on the update of our comprehensive zoning or comprehensive subregs and all involved. I've got a lot of exhibits in my for that discussion, looking at ways that we can keep the garage located where it is, 20 feet basically, or 21 feet behind the sidewalk, so that parked cars won't impede the pedestrian flow of traffic. But if we begin to let the front porch and part of the living space come forward, And that was one of your other questions that I failed to remember to answer. But if we let the front porch come forward, there's a couple of things that could be really beneficial from that. And we've been working on, in fact, we have that language approved in, I believe, the last 5, 6, 7 planned unit developments we've done in Oklahoma City. And we're struggling trying to get house plans that do that, mostly because, the whole industry hasn't gone there. We haven't started to see the collective mind of everyone in Oklahoma City trying to figure out how to, have a garage and then pull the living space forward. But I think what you would get if we allowed that is you could still end up with a meaningful backyard, and meaningful private backyards are important for pet ownership. 70% of Americans today have a pet, mostly dogs, and then also just that confined space to let kids go outside and play. So the backyard's important is one reason, putting the garage on the back of the house really is punitive to the backyard. But if we could pull the front of the house forward, we begin to start to be able to functionally serve the market with smaller lots. And I think we could begin to find where that minimum lot size is. Or we could just say it's X number of houses and let us put as much green space as we think we can, as the market wants. Because if we could, if I had a whole bunch of house plans up my sleeve that were extreme versions of this that I knew the market would buy and reward us for, then we would make the green space way bigger and just take it out of the front yard. Because the front yard is the biggest source of fertilizer and extra nutrient load into the overall watershed.
I'd like to point out that he has volunteered to be a part of the code, the zoning effort.
Yeah, I think I heard him say he was committed to 5 nights a week is what I heard.
Whatever it takes.
Same pay as a planning commissioner?
No.
Normally, yeah. Rich, I have a question. I'm a big fan of Ideal Homes, and I've known you guys for years. Compare this to another one of your neighborhoods. I know most of your neighborhoods fairly well. Is this a Valencia? Is this a Wildflower?
This feels like one off the top of my head off of Reno and Garth Brooks called Skyline Trails. Skyline Trails features a large common area, walking trails with the idea of having people look out and be able to watch their kids get out in that green space. It's got a spine, kind of a green spine that runs down through it. So if you're familiar with that neighborhood, this one feels a lot like that area.
Okay. Have any additional questions, comments, concerns? If not, I'll take a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, did we? Is there anybody else that wants to speak on this item? I don't have anyone signed up. I don't have a, it doesn't matter, come down. I have somebody for 16 and 17, but not for 15.
Okay. This for 16 and 17?
We're on 15, aren't we?
The only issue, Greg and Wendy Tompkins, we live at 5301 on South Sarah Road.
It'll be number 13 on the...
We're the number
on the
13
lot.
with the drive.
Right up there. We have 5-acre lots. Everything on the west side of this addition is 5-acre lots. Everything on it would be the south side of the addition is
I don't know.
1
That's
acre,
not
2-acre lots, something like that.
We're concerned
But
about
the
the
thing is,
driveway.
I think what we had some concerns about is down Sarah Road, is there going to be any green space between the fence and the easement there? Or, any trees or, I know when we go down Sarah Road and a lot of the developments there that they've built, they have some trees planted, they have some green
They've got like
grass.
brick walls, they've got, the columns with the stockade, and then they'll put trees out there. The reason why we're asking is we've been there for 14 years. We see cows running, we see deers, we see wild turkeys. We've got all these animals and we feed them and stuff. putting in an addition like this is fine. We don't have a problem with that. Our problem is they're widening Sarah Road, which means we're going to get an abundant amount of traffic going up and down Sarah Road, trying to get out of our driveway with a major residential area that's going to be overflowing out that exit. How are we going to be in and out of our driveway?
So you are across Sarah Road.
We're lot 13.
Okay, on a, did you say 5-acre lot?
Uh-huh.
Well, everything
On
on
the-
the west
on that
side
side.
is 5-acre lots. I mean, you know, they said it was urban, but I mean, these houses have been there since the 80s.
And this was supposed to be on 5-acre lots.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So have you, are you matching up with their driveway? Is that what I see here? Okay. Do you want to speak to the treatment that you'll give to the property along Sarah Road?
So as was mentioned, Sarah Road is being widened. I believe the extra 17 feet's already been given by the property owner that owns it now. We would give the 17 feet when we go through the plating either way. We will, but there's no variance in the PUD for any of the variance to the landscape requirements set forth by Oklahoma City. So we'll meet all of those landscape requirements. On the sewer part, and I understand that the area is, it's developed in a kind of a rural section, but as we mentioned earlier, we're bringing, you know, the urban water and sewer down to the property to develop this in an urban manner. So we have no intention to vary the landscape requirements, though. So there'll be trees per Oklahoma City landscape, probably in excess, but at least to that level.
Go ahead.
We might be about to say the same thing.
Probably.
Can you help verbally illustrate to them what those landscape requirements mean? You say there's going to be trees.
So the landscape requirement, and off the top of my head, I don't have it, but the landscape requirement is based on frontage, the length of frontage. It's a required amount of points. Points are set forth by the type of tree that's there. So you get larger trees that allow for more points, smaller shrubs and flowers and things. Usually they go inside the the entrance signage and things like that. That's more or less how we have to, and then there's requirements set forth by Oklahoma City that we'll have to maintain. But I don't have it off the top of my head right now what we're going to plan on doing. But
JJ, do you have any greater detail rattling around in yours?
The landscape ordinance does require a landscape buffer along the arterial. I don't know what the exact requirement is, but it allows a point system where you do have some variables.
So, I'm sorry, we don't have more detail to offer you, but yes, they will be required to landscape the frontage along Sarah Road.
Okay. And as far as our driveway, as I see all these houses that are up towards the north, you've got that one exit and entrance that they're going to be coming in and out of.
yeah, so we do have to have the 2 points of access over there onto Sarah, because that's sort of the area we're going to be starting with. We're actually going to start with the south entrance just above the section that's AA. That's the plan. So at some point, we will need to take that second entrance back onto Sarah Road, though. We can work with you on an appropriate way to do this, but we need the exit there. And at some point, like there's houses that front Sarah, so at some point we have to come across, and we can look at if there's a better option for you, though.
Well, the south entrance and exit, there's no driveway.
Yeah, and so
16
that's
and
the main
17,
one.
Their entrance comes in off of Trails West.
Yes.
So there is no driveway that they have to worry about. But our driveway is going to be lined up with yours, with all these cars going in and out. How are we going to access in and out of our driveway?
And that's, like I said, that's not our intention to be the main point, but
Yeah, if I could, this is a really unusual that we would have as many entrances and exits on a quarter section. Contrast this to a 595-acre neighborhood, our Valencia neighborhood. it only has 6 entrances and exits, and what it ends up accidentally doing is concentrating the traffic like you're very concerned about. And so, lesson learned, 12 years down the line, we've started to put in lots more entrance and exits to diffuse that traffic and not concentrate it basically at your driveway. And if you'll, I wish I had a laser pointer, but most of the traffic is going to find its way either to that south entrance, if it's headed to Sarah and then north, or it's going to also flow down here to the 2 south entries and head to 59th. Usually people are headed toward the employment zones, and my prediction is going to be you're going to see more of the traffic flowing south and then back east. But I think the entry across from your driveway, there's some logic to it lining up like that rather than being offset. And but I think it'll be the least trafficked.
What is the logic to it?
I'm going to let
Okay.
So the logic is based on it's based on turning things. So if you have somebody that's just slightly offset from you, if you're both turning opposite directions, you don't see. If you pull up directly in front of somebody, you see them there. So if you're trying to turn left and they're trying to turn left, you don't have this interaction. So that's why we do the kind of straight on section there. That it's kind of an odd situation where we have a lot of road, onto Sarah. But
Could you maybe give these folks a card?
Yes.
And they can stay in touch with you, kind of keep them updated on what's happening in that regard?
Yes, absolutely.
Also, both the matching up and the separation are requirements of ours. Those are things that they're having to do, based on what we require. Their points of access onto Sarah Road have to be a certain distance between. And where there is a driveway across, I will say at least encourage, if not require, that those match up, because it actually facilitates the flow of traffic, even though that seems kind of counterintuitive.
Well, we've actually got another driveway that's a little farther south, and it would be a lot easier because we don't use that driveway often compared to the one that we're constantly going in and out of.
Yeah.
So
the one to your shop addition.
Yes.
Right.
And we can look and see if there's some sort of placement in there that this
where
is.
we could move it at least to where, it's going to be hard enough with them widening Sarah Road and them raising the speed limit to 45, getting in and out.
It's 45 now.
Or 45, and it'll probably raise to 50. So, that's my concern, is getting in and out of my driveway. So,
I just hope that we don't, make the lot sizes smaller than normal. All the houses around us,
you're talking
pretty big
$400,000
houses.
neighborhood.
And, Sarah Homestead across the street from 59th there, it's a,
And so that difference in the lot size has to do with that urban versus rural designation. And basically that has been driven by the fact that there are not utilities available. So as part of the process here, they're bringing utilities to this area, and with the extension of the turnpike and so forth, the pressure on development in the area is just going to be virtually inevitable. So they're having to bring utilities, and that's why we lifted the urban reserve on this piece of property. It's going to make it more developable, that's hard to say, at a smaller lot size. So probably not going to be a whole lot more of those large lot developments going on out there.
Okay. So we'll be.
Yeah. Chairman Powers, if I can real quick, you mentioned earlier on the density that we had, and like I said earlier, we did have a preliminary plat that was in before this and before we started dealing with Ideal, and I actually lost 5 lots on their layout due to the large amounts of common area that they wanted. So the overall density of this is roughly what it would be with the same R1. We did vary that lot depth to allow for that large common area to run through the middle. So that was the change.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for coming down. We appreciate it. I know those benches are really hard. Commissioners, where are we? Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard? If not, I think I'm ready. Not quite yet.
To the applicant here, the two technical evaluations that are listed under our option number 1, should the comp plan amendment have been approved, which it was, you want to strike A and B, correct? Which,
Yes.
okay, that's what I just want to make sure we were all clear that on those. There's no more discussion. I'll make a motion if you guys are ready for that. All right, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the application PUD 1724 to City Council, striking the listed TEs A and B.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 15 without the TEs listed under item number 1. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Item number 16 is also related, a preliminary plat of Bixby Canyon being a part of, I'll skip that part. It's located east of Sarah Road and north of Southwest 59th.
Brad Reed, Craft and Tall. This is the accompanying preliminary plat. I think we've kind of hit most of the topics on the PUD, so if you have any other questions on it specifically, we'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, do we have any additional or different concerns or questions about this item?
I have, so there's 6 Ts here. Are you in agreement with those? Which Ts do we need to make amendments to? And there's one that is different related to the platting part, which is the jog there, where in the street they want to make that perpendicular Bixby Canyon Boulevard.
Yeah, so we are fine with 1, 2, 3 is fine. 4 we can make work. 5 and 6, yeah, we're fine with all staff comments.
Okay. Pause for discussion, or I'll make a motion.
Is there any additional discussion?
If we approve the plat, is the discussion we had about the driveway and the access road, is there ability to still adjust that if they come to agreement?
Yes, this is just
specific
preliminary
plan?
plat, so, yeah. So I do have your sign-up sheet for this item. Is there anything else you wanted to say to us about that? Okay, great.
There's no further discussion. I'll make a motion to approve item number 16, C7061.
One quick thing, I might be confused. Did you speak up a second ago? Are you here to talk on this item, or were you?
I'm here to the item citizens to be heard from the east side.
Okay, so not in relation to this specific item. Okay, sorry.
My motion stands.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 16. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 17, PC 10581, application by Cheryl Denny to rezone 9521 Southwest 15th from AA to R1.
Good afternoon. Lance Wendell, 600 South Washington, down in Ardmore. Thank you for your time this afternoon. This is our second run. 2 weeks ago, we were in front of you, and previous to our meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a community meeting for some folks adjacent to our neighborhood. We're looking, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. We're looking at a 40-acre tract here, pretty close to the corner of Morgan and 15th Street in the southwest. Currently zoned AA, and we're asking to rezone that to R1. So we had a community meeting, but it was prior to your meeting 2 weeks ago. Had some folks come in and talk to us and kind of heard their concerns. Then at our last meeting, one of the folks who wasn't able to attend, a resident in the Sunnybrook Edition, Judy Treckler, had some concern that she addressed in front of you about the length of notice that they had had. Didn't think they had enough notice, and so you guys kind of delayed until they had time to look at it again and until this meeting. In between our past 2 meetings, I've had a chance to talk to a couple of residents, talk to Mrs. Treckler again. they weren't up on having another meeting. I listened to their concerns. Again, I had a couple of others that I talked to. And their concerns kind of remained the same. I didn't really hear anything new that they hadn't brought up in front of you before. And those are valid concerns. I'm not here to invalidate them. But they are definitely valid concerns for the proper forum. Kind of what they're concerned about that I'm hearing from them is traffic. I'm hearing concerns about drainage. I'm hearing concerns about the type of homes that are going to be built and the financings that's used to build those homes. Also the proximity of that adjacent or that land to some industrial to its south that might cause some issues with the homes getting built. And then a little bit of kind of personal attacks on me and my ability to perform are kind of the things that I'm hearing concerns from the residents, mainly in the Sunnybrook, a little bit in the Westbury addition. Now, I don't disagree with those are valid concerns, but they all have their time and place. I don't feel like the zoning process from AA to R1 is the time to address most of those concerns. If this does get rezoned, I'll be back in front of you during the platting process, and I think the platting process would be a good time to talk about the traffic situation and how that's going to affect the adjacent neighbors, to allow for my engineer to work with the city's engineer to make sure that drainage is addressed. That's in the platting process. As for how I'm going to build the homes or the financing or the construction type of the homes, the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, OFA, which is where I would have to apply for my bond application, has the ability and has a process in place for residents to address their concerns. So I think that would be an appropriate time. As for some of those personal attacks, I think at the meeting that I had with the community, there was a misunderstanding about something that I said. The question came up, hey, we know of some abandoned projects and we don't want someone to get halfway started and abandon it, and how are we going to get protected from that? And what I said was, I've got bankers and investors that watch over my shoulder on a daily basis, and if I even begin to fail, they're going to step in, they're going to remove me, and they're going to finish the project. I certainly didn't say, hey, if this thing fails, I'm out of here. That was not my intent. I'm sorry if they misunderstood that. That's not where I was going. What I said was, there are processes in place that include investors and bankers that are watching over me to make sure that I don't allow the project to fail. This will be my 19th development of this type, and at this point in time, we've been very successful with them. And again, if they were having any questions, I would ask them to address Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, call them directly, and talk to their executive director, Deborah Jenkins, for my reputation and the work that I've done with them. But my main point today is, and I've tried to point it out to the concerned citizens, is that currently this land is zoned AA. The owner of the land has decided that he wants to sell it. And the way he's pricing it, it is obviously not to be used for agriculture. His price does not support an agricultural use of it. So I think that it's fair to say that he intends that this land is going to get rezoned from the current ag that it is, in line with the Oklahoma City Comprehensive Plan, to something else. And I think what I would like to propose that on R1, on that 40-acre tract, is the least invasive to the residents next to it than any other zoning. That is probably, I feel like that would be a better zoning for them than to zone it for duplexes, to certainly zone it for multifamily, for an apartment complex, or to zone it for a commercial or an industrial use. There's industrial to the north, right, that is adjacent to. There's industrial to the south. I think that the R1 zoning that I'm asking for today is the best use and kind of their best case scenario to help protect them from some other probably not nearly as desirable use for that 40 acres. The city staff has pointed out in their report that R1 is completely in compliance with the comprehensive plan that's already been discussed about multiple times today. Sundrop Lane, as you can see, goes through and actually stops at that adjacent AA, as showing that, you know, eventually there's going to be R1. It's in concrete, if you will, and has been for several years, that that's kind of the expected use of the land there to the east. So based upon staff's recommendation that this is an appropriate zoning, I ask that the commission approve a rezone of this 40 acres from AA to R1. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicant? We have a number of people signed up to speak. Let's hear from them. Are all of you people here to be heard on this item? I only have 3 sheets, which is fine, but we'll just go in order. Catherine Davidson, did you have something you wanted to say?
I unfortunately am running out of time today, and I just wanted to say I do want to be here for the entirety of this item. And I'd just like to say that if we have the same comments multiple times, if people are in agreement with a previous comment, if they could just state that, and let's make sure again that we're efficient with time. I'd appreciate that.
So let me, Ms. Davidson, if you'll come forward. So to sort of facilitate this part of this conversation, let me say that we are not here to rule on, talk about, or consider whether these properties are being built for rental purposes or for owner occupation. It's not part of our decision-making process. We're also not here to talk about the financing mechanism for the development. That's also not part of our decision-making process. Things like traffic and drainage are part of our consideration, although to some extent it is true that those kinds of details are more specifically dealt with often at platting stage than through the rezoning process. The only question that's really here before us today for decision is whether this piece of property is appropriate for rezoning from agricultural to R1. And the applicant is correct in the sense that R1 is sort of considered the lowest and least intense and dense and impactful zoning on our books. We regularly take property into the city and give it an R1 zoning. So having said all that, please give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Catherine Davidson. I live at 9601 Bluebonnet Place. You actually pointed out two of my biggest concerns, and that is I live on the corner of Bluebonnet Place and Soft Wind. They are talking about making an entrance into this neighborhood where people would be coming around my corner. I've had several incidents where people have hit my mailbox because of living on that corner. There's also a jog right there when you get off on Morgan. It's on Sunnybrook, and then it kind of turns right there. There are a lot of people that park in the street right there, and so if you're adding 160 houses to that, it's highly concernable to me how many people are going to be coming around the corner. Another issue that I have is it floods. I think it is considered a floodplain. What is the builder going to do to prevent, if he builds up the land, that water not coming back into my house and causing my area then to become a floodplain to where I'd have to get flood insurance?
About the only thing that I can tell you about that at this particular stage of the process is that our codes and ordinances do not permit development to make any kind of flooding worse than it is.
Okay.
At this stage, at a zoning stage like this, people are very seldom ready to answer questions about how they're going to deal with drainage issues. Mm-hmm. All of that is kind of a plan review process when they know exactly what they're going to build and exactly how they're going to lay it out, which is part of the platting. Then, they get involved with public works and discuss things like, where the water's going to go and how they're going to keep it from going in the wrong place. So I'm not sure we can give you much satisfaction on your questions here today, but we appreciate you coming down to address them with us and express them.
All right. Thank you.
William Sharp.
I'm William Sharp, 1432 Sunnybrook Lane. I will address exactly going from AA to R1. I don't believe that this area is appropriate at all for residential use. I've lived in this area my whole life. I farmed just across the creek where you see the AA at the bottom hand of your corner. I used to farm that ground over there. I've lived at 29th and County Line until 20 years ago I got married and moved to Sunnybrook Lane. Where this says oil well here on PD 1512 there, that is an oil well disposal well. It is not just an oil well, it is a saltwater disposal well. There's dozens of trucks coming in and out of there day and night. Last week, on one of the few dry days we had, coming from across the creek up the road, before I could ever see down that way, I knew there was a truck coming out by the volume of dust that was coming up from that place. During the summer, it's a gravel area, it blows. You get houses up in there, apartments, any kind of anything, they're going to be covered with dirt. This was presented to us. I met with Mr. Wendell at our first meeting, with public meeting thing, and I mentioned about the dust. Another person that was there mentioned about the smell that can sometimes come from the saltwater disposal well. I don't hear anything about any of the commission. Of course, nobody of you all probably or your staff live out there to see these things. But I would never want to live directly south of this. We have a prevailing south wind here in Oklahoma, as you all know. And back behind where it says 1512, they have a pit back there that was a sand pit. Now they're dumping dirt in it. Trucks go in and out of there, especially these small trucks doing storm shelters. And they take their dirt back there to dump. It kicks up dirt. All of these houses are going to be covered with dirt. Terex is directly to the north, just off of the map. Mr. Wendell noted that he had a option on the 20 acres up there, so I presume at some point this could be continued on. That's heavy industry. There's fan noise that this winter was unreal. At 24 hours a day, they added something up there. Now it's muffled, but even last night, trying to get my thoughts together, laying in bed, I can still hear that, and I'm on the west center part of Sunnybrook Lane. You're putting all these houses up there next to heavy industry and a disposal well that makes dirt, has semi-trucks going out day and night. Luckily, they're getting started or not slowing down directly next to us, but they are when they're over in that area. I don't know that I've heard anybody address this concern. At our short little meeting, which only 4 of us were at, I was the only one in my little circle area there that I talked to that got the little postcard that said a development in your area. It didn't say what was going on, just said development thing. So I attended that. I mentioned to him about the dust. Somewhere I was going with that, sorry. Not very good public speaker.
You're doing fine.
He did not know that, so he had not assessed this in his evaluation of whether to have houses here or not, whether they're rental or not. I don't know who would want to stay in a house and have their kids. He's talking about these being entry level. You're going to have kids around. Who's going to go one out and have their toys all covered with dust and play with them? Their cars sitting out there covered with dirt. Who's going to want to sit there and listen to Terex's fans, high-speed fans, all night long? These are something I think that this would probably be more suited to a light industrial area. We have lots of these in our area that are the small warehouses. They're mostly occupied during daytime. A lot of them is still oil field equipment type stuff, but they're generally not that noisy type thing. This would be more suited, the 60 acres that's up through there, for something like that. If this is developed with houses, the 20 acres behind it almost has to become more houses, clear up to Terex. Otherwise, it's going to be completely cut off from any type of access. And I don't think this is being pictured into the overall plan of what you all are looking at or being presented to. So I think some of this is kind of, part of it's by living out there and seeing what's going on, that I don't think a lot of people are stopping to think. I still have concerns, as we've all noted, on the rental thing and all that. But this is something that addresses the residential prospects.
I appreciate that. Do you have any questions for Mr. Sharp?
It sounds like your concerns would also be reasonable concerns if, say, the development that you live in came through today, wouldn't you say? I mean, it seems like a lot of the things that you're saying are issues.
At times we get the dirt. It's more of just, it has to be a true southeast wind, which is quite as prevalent. At times we do get the dirt. I'm growing up on a farm. I like to have my house open this kind of weather, you know. So when it's coming from the southeast, I don't open up. It's far enough away that I'd never smelt the smell. When you're driving by out on the road, sometimes you smell it, sometimes you don't. I don't know what there is about it. But it's a very strong smell. I would say that even possibly in the future, there could be people living there will be bringing up concerns to the city or DEQ or something about these smells, whether they're toxic or not. But yes, and I would suppose the people on the east side get more affected by the dirt and everything. But, you know, generally we get more of a true south wind type thing, which is going to be going right up through the east part of that development there, affecting it greatly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Sinard, did I get it right that time? Sorry. Sinard? All right.
I'd like to address some of the same. My name is Jerry Sinard. I live at 1412 Soft Wind Avenue, Oklahoma City. I live basically, let's see if my pointer will work. I live basically right here. Just this parcel is 2 inches from my lot. So all this out here floods. The last 2 weeks, it's been all the rain we've had. My yard has backed up 3.5 feet. The water is backed up because my yard slopes downward. The whole neighborhood slopes toward this project. Actually, in some studies I've done, Southwest 8th to Southwest 15th all slopes into this area. From Morgan, all of Sunnybrook has no storm drains whatsoever. They use all of the streets to drain the water to right here. It flows down into this parcel. Most of Sunnybrook, like I spoke with before, comes down here and drains into Sundrop Place, his entry into the neighborhood. This is going to be his entry. This whole intersection right here floods curb level every time it rains. They have a deal with the Action Center right now to come out and fix a pothole, but not to fix the intersection. The city is responsible, I understand, for keeping this free of debris. They've not since I've lived there. I've lived there 23 years. This area up here, the water comes down from Morgan all the way down this way through this jog and comes down this way where Judy lives. Say your name again. Anyway, she lives right here. This is supposed to be cleaned out so the water can drain into the area. All this up here drains. The Tyrex or whatever it is, they drain into the field. I've got pictures right now from the rain the last couple of days. There's a lake out in the middle of this field. For him to raise that to a level so he can build is going to create a dam for Sunnybrook and all these areas. So that water has nowhere to go except back toward us. Then this traffic, there's a jog right here. This really doesn't show how bad the jog is. It goes way out into here. There's always a problem right here. The Sunnybrook folks don't know if it's the Blue Bonnet Places right away or the Sunnybrooks right away. But when we're leaving in the mornings or whatever, this is a cluster right here. So this is a traffic problem. People will be asked to enter right here, come down Blue Bonnet, turn here, and turn here to get into their neighborhood. There'll be an entrance, I understand, here. This is not, like he said, this is not a good place to build homes. This should be a park. This should be something other than a home place, just because of the fact that it floods. And if it's raised, an acre of land is 43,560 square feet. If you raise it 4 feet, just multiply that by that many cubic feet. A lot of dirt will have to be brought in to raise that to a level. And if they raise it, it's going to be up against my fence. So what are they going to do for all the people right along this area right here, right along Sunnybrook, the east side of Sunnybrook? How can they make us drain if they raise the dirt level 3 or 4 feet?
Yeah, I can't answer that question here today.
So,
but I can assure you that they will have to answer that question before they get their plans approved.
That's our primary concern is, and like he said about the dirt thing, this is an oil field supply. The dust that he's talking about is oil related, so the dust sticks to everything. It's gooey dust. And that fan thing that he's talking about runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes it's and it never stops. So I wouldn't want to live there. It's bad enough that we live here. We have to close everything. It's just a noise. Sometimes we put headphones on. But this is just not a good project for this area. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate that input. I really do. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item?
I did leave out one thing. Besides the saltwater disposal well, it is a large frac tank area. He has business there with frac tanks, and some of them are acid tanks. They do have a wash pit there where they wash these things out. There's a sandblasting area back there just about where it says oil wells that creates dust also. So, it's not just the disposal well. There's a full oil field operation supply business going on there, and it is of scale and getting bigger.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Out of curiosity, is the operation that they're describing, because according to our staff report, the underlying zoning for 1512 is I-1 and C3. Would this use be in compliance with that zoning?
Depends on what it is. If it's oil and gas wells and those sort of things, they're approved or would have been approved through the Board of Adjustment. We just have to take a look at it.
I'm just curious. I think it would probably be appropriate, given the feedback we're getting today, for at least for that to be reviewed, to have that zoning reviewed, because at least at first, I don't have 1512 in front of me, and I don't know if variances have been granted.
We can also do a noise.
C3 and I-1 certainly don't allow for sand blasting and gigantic fans, I don't think, last time I looked.
I would point out to the commissioners that our staff report indicates that this application is consistent with the comprehensive plan, compatible with surrounding development. They're recommending approval. There are no TEs. It sounds to me like there are any number of problems with the site that will make it difficult to develop, but that's certainly nothing new. And those issues with respect to drainage and so forth will all have to be addressed. So,
it's my belief. I know why you guys are concerned. I think we all know why you guys are concerned. I don't think that the items today are going to change my belief that the zoning isn't compatible. The neighbors here, you guys live in an R1 neighborhood. Is R1 the same zoning that you have consistent next door to you? I do believe it is. I think the stages and the things that you were concerned about, as pointed out previously, are more appropriate for a different body. And as far as what we do, I just can't see none of what I've heard today personally. Can I do the math and say that this isn't compatible? I think single-family homes make sense next to single-family homes. So that's where I'm at.
I would just say, Mr. Sharp, who spoke, made some good points. As you look at the area, though, this is just a convergence, right? You've got the heavy industrial development that takes place on the east side of on the west side of 44, all the way over to Morgan Road in various parts. It's a very industrialized corridor, and then you have a lot of residential development that's taking place. That's moving east. That's coming out of Mustang in areas that have been developed for a long, long time. And this little pocket is sort of where everything starts to meet. Turex to the north, which abuts I-40 and all those sorts of things. So I get all that. I'm in agreement that from a zoning perspective it's appropriate. I think it's pretty clear there's enough of a contingency here. I sure hope that as you begin to work through the platting phase, where these good people's concerns are really more appropriate, you're taking the time to meet with them, because they've been here and sat on these benches for a long time, and they're going to be back. And we're going to want to hear about the plat at length then too. But I'm in agreement that the zoning at this juncture really, frankly, couldn't be more appropriate from my seat.
In some ways, I think that's probably a true statement. If they were here asking, if the applicant were here asking for industrial development, we would not approve it next to the residential that exists.
I think we'd want to step down, right? I mean, you could make an argument, I think, here that I-1 is appropriate. And with all due respect, I don't know that you would rather, I don't know that you would rather have that given what the ordinances and the zoning allows. And I would encourage you guys to look at those things after today. But I think it'd be a tough deal for me to argue that I-1 wouldn't be appropriate given where it's coming from the east side. But man, I sure wouldn't be comfortable with because of these residences, right, with outdoor storage and everything. So, yeah, it's a tough little pocket.
Anybody else? If not, I'll take a motion.
I move approval of R1 zoning for this area.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 17. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
You all do have his contact information, right? It'd be super helpful if you could make sure they have that today.
I need to step out for a moment. Will you come do this? Do we want to take a break? We're going to have a presentation, and we have citizens to be heard if he's still here. So I think we're going to go on for a little while. If we want to take a break, we can. If not, you can just come sit and I'll step out.
I got to go. I apologize.
Bye.
I'm curious what this is, though, and I'm going to come back and watch it later on when it gets online, because I don't know what we're about. Total community development. That sounds interesting.
We're going to take 5.
Take it 5 minutes.
Hey.
Yeah. It was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So, which it's always good. There's a lot of moving parts. I mean, it's easy for us to talk about our side of the house, but there's obviously, and that's one of the reasons.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Glad we can be here. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, cool. Awesome. Which one? This one? Cool. Nice. Thank you. Okay, sounds good. If I panic, I'll holler at you. Is that how this works?
Okay, we'll start again. We have with us this afternoon Jeff Seymour, the Executive Vice President for Economic Development, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. The question of employment reserve has been a recurring issue for us, and I felt like it was just really important for us to do a little bit of background and how we got here and why we're doing this. Part of that is kind of a staff function with respect to the plan and so forth. But I wanted to have Mr. Seymour come and talk to us about the chamber. They were very instrumental initially in I want to choose my words carefully here, promoting the idea, I'm not quite sure, of facilitating the discussion about the need for these pockets of developable land that are large enough to accommodate a very certain type of employer, these kind of large-scale developments. And so I'm just going to stop talking and let you talk.
So do you want me to, I can give my address if that would help. So
sure,
it is an Oklahoma City resident. So 1900 Wheatfield Avenue in Oklahoma City. We're in that Utang area, the Yukon Mustang area. So first of all, let me give a quick introduction to tie to Janice's comments. This is really meant just to be a conversation. When Janice, you and I had talked, knowing that we continue to be very successful in our growth in the community, and what great news that we're thinking about how ways to grow our community as opposed to like other cities around the United States trying to figure out what contraction looks like, that we're in a position of growth. But within that position of growth, trying to help make really good strategic decisions from a community perspective, particularly around land use. And I think today is a really good demonstration of you as a planning commission have really tough decisions to make. And, you know, the example of the employment land reserve discussion that came up earlier, you know, trying to figure out a project that's in the now that you're making a decision about versus holding a big piece of property in reserve for these big idea pictures that we have. How do those two things intersect? And so what we thought would be a really good conversation for you would just be talking about sort of the premise of economic development a little bit, but also to give you some statistics that talks about the current projects that we're seeing and the history of projects we've seen in this community to help you guys have some more data points to think about when it relates to making big important decisions, particularly on employment land reserve. So I'm going to kind of go through that stuff real fast. The meat and potatoes is some statistics that we think you can look at. And then on the backside of that, I want to tell you just about some current trends that we're seeing. Again, this is meant to be extremely conversational. We know that economic development and land use is just always one part of a much bigger picture about community development and making sure that all things work together well. So Roy Williams was supposed to be here to give the first part, but he had to unfortunately step out. So I'm going to kind of touch on his slides, and then I'll spend more time on my piece of it, and we can kind of go from there if that works for you. So the one thing that Roy wanted to say is really, honestly, pretty much what I just touched on, that Economic development is really the confluence of a lot of different factors in a community, making sure that your social environment, your political environment, your economic environment, and your physical environment are all working well together. And as it relates to this conversation, this is very much centered on making sure your physical environment is working well. That as projects come to Oklahoma City, that we have an appropriate inventory of land and buildings to put them in so they can be successful in our market. I will tell you that land and building inventory in Oklahoma City, though we have a very large geographic spread, is much more difficult than you would think, particularly when it comes to large projects, and I'll give you those statistics later. The big place that we tend to have the most difficulty is if I have a large industrial employer that's looking at a parcel of property 50 acres or larger to try to find a place that is currently zoned and has decent enough infrastructure and doesn't have encumbrances like floodplain issues or creek issues and some other things or surrounding residential land use to put forward, it's extremely difficult. I'll just tell you that. It's extremely difficult. And it's becoming more and more difficult as we continue to grow. What Roy would say here is just again to emphasize all these social factors and economic factors and physical factors have to work really well together. And that's the way you create jobs is by having all those functions work really well. And I think we do a really good job of that in the community. When we think about growth in our market from a chamber perspective, it's all focused on primary job growth. So it's things that import wealth from outside the community to your community. So we're not talking about the retail and commercial sector. We're really talking about primary jobs that make and have an additional benefit of creating other jobs in the community. For the sake of this conversation, that's technology jobs, that's high-end office jobs, and then that's manufacturing and warehousing. Those are probably the four big buckets. I'm not going to spend time on this, but again, all these things have to work really well together. Roy likes this slide, and I like to touch on it, is in the United States in general, there's about 1,500 economic development agencies. And so we're competing for a very narrow pool of projects when people think about making a corporate site location decision. These are just some statistics, but I can tell you it's rare for a community to have relocation success, and we have done really well in our community by positioning our community as a whole to win some of these big projects. So that's really kudos to you, but we're just trying to make sure that we look at the economic horizon and making sure we're designing to that economic horizon and have the resources and land and inventory, everything else we need in place to make sure we can continue to win these big projects that you're all very familiar with. So I'm just going to kind of give you a quick snapshot of the overall pipeline. This is a very current snapshot. This is from last month that shows you the type of projects that are looking at Oklahoma City actively. These are the projects that we're actively working. It's about 75 to 80 projects. And you can see that the vast majority of those are actually manufacturing projects, which would probably surprise a lot of people. It surprises me, and I work this, I do this every day. So if you combine manufacturing and distribution projects, you have much more of a larger share of those kind of projects than any other type of projects actively looking at the market.
What is ODOC? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, so those are where that we get the lead sources, and that's the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. If they originate the lead and bring it to us versus we originate it in our office or someone calls us directly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's just we show that, we're actively becoming the primary source for where people are contacting as far as doing big projects. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these two slides, but it just shows you from a manufacturing square footage perspective and a warehouse perspective, what's the spread of types of size range of square footage of buildings that people are looking at. Same with the acreage requirements here. Warehouse project the same for square footage and acreage. This is really the meat and potatoes, is that of all the projects in our current pipeline that have a known land and building inventory, 62% of those are looking for parcels that are 20 acres or larger. And 29% of those are looking for properties of 50 acres or larger, just reemphasizing that point I was telling you, that a lot of these projects are looking for large tracts of property, and we find it more and more difficult to find those parcels throughout the metro area. Of current warehouse projects, the same thing. Though the number is smaller, 50% of those are looking at properties that are 50 acres or larger. So bigger projects, bigger impacts, looking for larger land sites. That's the current pipeline. If you look at the history of projects, we did a look back over the past 5 years of 107 projects, so all industrial projects that the market has lost. The average square foot of those projects that we had lost was between 175 and 212,000 square foot. And the land requirement of those was between 65 and 85 acres. So you can see that not having that inventory directly affects our ability to compete for these projects. And that's really that last kind of section. We ask projects why they don't land. If we lose a project, we always ask them for feedback why. And of the ones that provided feedback, 40% said it's because of a lack of building or site inventory. So correlating all these things together, I can tell you not having good inventory is going to continue to be an issue unless we think about it long term. And that's where it correlates back into the employment land reserve conversation. I can tell you some other trends that just we're seeing, and then at the end of this, happy to just kind of have a dialogue back and forth if that would help, is we see some really specific types of projects that are asking for larger and larger parcels of property. Some really specific recent examples. One is data center project. We had a data center project actively looking at our market that started with a land requirement of 60 acres, quickly grew to 150 acres, and quickly grew beyond that to a 500-acre requirement. There is very few parcels of property throughout the metro area that you can put a 500-acre land user. And we were able to put some sites together that included employment land reserve sites, but even those were really difficult. And I will tell you, one of those was one that had recently had a piece carved out for a residential user. We were able to still put it forward, but obviously it wasn't as clean as we would have originally liked. But understand, you guys have to make really important decisions about projects in the now versus projects in the future. We're also seeing warehouse and manufacturing projects grow in size. I have 2 projects that have called me in the last week. One is looking for 100 to 125 acres. And another's looking for 80 acres for a large warehouse project. And again, I'm really having to scrape to figure out where I'm going to potentially put these users, particularly when you overlay infrastructure requirements, large capacity infrastructure requirements. We also, this is a sort of an anecdotal comment, but I think it's a meaningful comment, is that we have more and more developers looking at our market to also think about industrial parks, which is a good conversation to have. We want to have these areas of large contiguous acres that we can do multiple projects and not just one-off conversations. But I can just tell you that the developer market is also heating up for this, for our market, and we're going to have to think big picture and long term as we continue to think about our overall land development needs. I say all of that to tell you that it's a partnership with our organization and the city, and we're excited about where that partnership has always been and the fact that we've had the ability to have these big picture conversations, particularly related to employment land reserve. We just want to make sure you have good information as you continue to have projects that come across your desk and you're trying to make these big picture decisions. We need large land sites. But we want to do it in the context of a bigger community conversation. So with that, Janice, I turn it over, I guess, to questions.
Just like with previously, you just expect people to hold on to these large, giant chunks of land and not do anything with them in the hopes of someday pie in the sky is going to fall and we're going to get another Amazon? Or, I mean, I hear what you're wanting, but how do you propose keeping those pieces of land available waiting on something to come?
I think it's going to have to be, and I don't want to speak for the city, but we're going to have to probably make some decently tough decisions from a public and private partnership standpoint, whether or not these other mechanisms that we need to think about to sort of lock these properties down and figure out how the private sector relates to them in the future. To your point, pie in the sky, the in and now versus the, well, we hope this is going to happen, I completely understand that conversation. I can say, though, if we don't preserve some of these properties in some capacity, you're going to miss out on some big projects moving forward. We're going to just see more and more of that, I think. There's probably a conversation about a middle ground to lock some of this stuff down and make sure that the landowner has some sort of assurance of what that relationship may look like in the future.
How does that work with your relationships for some of these landowners? To that same point, do you all visit when you're considering these spots that you might want to put these major developments, do you visit with those landowners? Are they aware that they're living in land or that they own land that you all would like to reserve? Are they aware of that?
I think some of them are and some of them aren't, and I think that's part of the conversation about this continuum of development that could occur. On the very far left end is we have this property in employment land reserve and the owner doesn't even know. There's a continuation of all this, and one of these is maybe just having conversations with more of the folks that have the property. There's a lot of things that could happen on the overall continuum to lock it down and develop it.
Let's take the guy today with the 11.2 acres in the middle of this. What would you tell him?
I think you guys made a tough decision, but it seemed like you had a live project in front of you. I mean, you guys had a live project in front of you. It looked like it met the surrounding land use per city guidelines, and you made a decision about it. I can't argue with your decision by any means. I think the other thing is, for me, more importantly, is those places to the west of that property where you did have the bigger contiguous acreage and trying to preserve those things. The 12-acre stuff is not a big deal. It's the 500-acre stuff that's probably more important.
I think the difficulty in the cases that are presented to us often have to do with properties that are actually in multiple ownership, which of course always complicates everything. If you have 500 acres that's in single ownership, that's one thing. I do think that we have to keep in mind, though, that very few of these properties are being denied development. They very often are agricultural land, or very low density, 5-acre tracts or 2-acre tracts or whatever. It's not that they can't be developed for that; they can, but it's that there is pressure on them to increase that. But I also think that it's important for us to keep in mind that very, very often the properties that are presented to us as potential development sites are in somebody else's ownership. So it's not the property owner that's in here saying, I want to develop it. It's someone who wants to buy that land and develop it. And I don't know if that makes a difference to anybody else, but it does to me. That's a very different thing, especially when you're talking about people who have family farms that they've been farming for, decades, and now there's development pressure on them, and they have an opportunity to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying, it's not that the land is sitting there growing weeds. It's not that nothing's being done with it. So,
what I would say to you, Jeff, and as you know, my firm is a chamber member, right? But what I would tell you is that you guys need better mechanisms. My criticism of the comprehensive plan as it relates to this is that the decision, and if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected here, okay, was made two-dimensionally. It was made like this. This is a big piece of land. We're looking at an aerial. There it is. Let's identify that, and we'll mark it. When we have cases come through, one of which was an employment reserve that had horrible access to infrastructure, was adjacent to an incredible amount of existing residential development. What the community doesn't understand, and what I'm so bothered by as a planning commissioner, is that, to your point, big manufacturers are the city's biggest ticket right now. That's the hot lead, right?
Right.
If you would have come in here as the chamber with an applicant who wanted to build a manufacturing facility, and you guys know which case I'm talking about, and you have wanted to build it, there's no way I could have gotten behind it. There's no way, because the neighborhood would have thrown a fit.
Absolutely.
And so I am all for the chamber on a long-range basis, and you don't have to explain it to me. I get it.
Yeah.
But to why we need to identify these sites, I think that you guys need to work with the city, the staff, the planning department, the city council predominantly, to put better mechanisms in place, maybe that have more teeth, maybe that help from an ordinance standpoint, to identify sites and use public-private partnerships to really secure them, because I don't care whether it's a family farmer who's owned it 20 years or it's a new guy who wants to develop it. Either way, To your point, we have a live person in front of us, and the market tells us what is in demand in this city, not what someone did on a two-dimensional map. I'm sorry. That doesn't tell me what's coming and what we need to be focused on. Doesn't mean anything to me. And whether or not that farmer has owned that land for 20 years or 2 years, if someone knocks on his door and he can, and by all means,
Absolutely.
You should make, that's why people own land, to make money, right? So it just is what it is. You don't have to like it.
Right.
Nobody has to like it, but that is what it is. So I hope that we continue to find better mechanisms for it, and I support it. But when applications come in, the question for me at this point, just for me, right, wrong, or indifferent, is I take that away. What does the surrounding land use tell me?
Right.
And does that make it appropriate for the application in front of me? Any other purview for me is a step too far.
Well, I can tell you that I very much respect that as a resident of the community, and knowing that part of our conversation is trying to make sure that we have a community built that addresses current needs, period. And part of that is residential housing and or commercial use and all these other uses. I think the big thing for us is just there's probably going to have to be, to your point, some other big picture conversations about how we make sure there's parcels of property in Oklahoma City limits to foster primary job creation moving forward. And part of that has to be for manufacturing users and warehouse users, and trying to figure out where those are now and how we as a community decide around that and protect it, lock it down, whatever it is, and not just have a guess at pie in the sky stuff, but try to figure out exactly where that stuff can go and making sure we have some large parcels preserved as part of that conversation. So I think you're spot on, and I know you have, I mean, you guys have a tough job, especially when these things are like, hey, I need to make a decision today.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll chime in too, because, and we, as Jeff alluded to, we are looking at trying to secure, or at least get some level of control in some of these properties. When we did the map, there was a lot of research that went into it, and what are good locations, what, we worked with the chamber a lot to what do these companies need typically, and the challenge is they need a lot of things that are for the same reasons, as I've said before, that these sites are attractive for residential, make them attractive for these industrial or office users, access to the freeways and major thoroughfares and so forth. But yeah, in fact, the Alliance is actively working right now to secure a very large site in the south, one of these employment reserve sites in the southeast quadrant of the city. The desire was, when we put this together, to try and locate sites in all quadrants of the city, and we are working to make that happen. In some cases, though, all we've got is kind of a policy recommendation that it be zoned appropriately. And I will say, on the as far as the compatibility concern, absolutely that's a concern that was considered by us and addressed in the comp plan to some degree, that it can be, but some stronger ordinances would be appropriate too. But employment reserve is I think more, rather than industrial, yes, manufacturing can be appropriate in employment reserve, but it would have to have some pretty steep compatibility mitigations. I think typically employment reserve was contemplated for uses that would be more friendly to residential and mixed in and so forth. So yeah, absolutely, compatibility is a critical point that the comp plan tried to address, and we all struggle with. This commission struggles with day to day, because you want uses to be integrated to the extent possible, so people can get to work and school and shopping, but also having that comfortable compatibility and space where necessary.
Do you all have a process for looking at the things, I guess, whenever I'm sure you all see our agendas and all that.
Yeah.
Do you all meet with some of these people where you see these areas that are going to be affecting the employment reserve?
Yeah,
Do you
so
have a process in
typically,
place?
yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll just kind of walk you through our process when somebody knocks on our door. They kind of tells you kind of how this all works together. So typically, a project comes in one of the doors that we described earlier, Department of Commerce, so they call us, or a site selection firm. We identify their needs, and then we say, for us, we represent actually a 10-county regional area, not just the city of Oklahoma City. So give us some idea of what your actual needs are, and then we'll work with the local brokerage community and local economic development partners to identify sites. And I will tell you that there's no the less hoops a client has to jump through, the better. And so, of course, what they're going to ask for first and foremost is a shovel-ready site that's already zoned, already owned by a known entity, and has utilities in place. It's already ready for all that industrial stuff, which is what we'd all want anyway, too. On the back end of that, where this conversation usually happens is the guy that says, hey, I want something unusually large or unusually sort of different. And we go, oh, okay, all right, where are we gonna find this? And we all kind of like do that deep breath thing. And that's when I call Jeff and go, hey, Jeff, how does this work in relation to the Employment Land Reserve? Is there anything that you guys think might be a good fit for this particular user based on everything they've given us that we should have a more active conversation about? So that's when we parse together their needs, how the Employment Land Reserve fits into that model, and then if it seems like it's something that we should go have a conversation about, then we engage. But we always do that after like all these other layers. So it's our goal, honestly, this is a hard property for us to put together. It's these unusual crests that drive us to go this direction. Is that fair, Jeff?
Yeah, that's fair, absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking how surprisingly difficult it is to find the sweet spot on some of these sites, because you would think that in a city of 620 square miles, and the chamber looks at the whole metro, that there should be plenty of land out there. But when the companies come in and request a certain amount of water capacity and sewer and power and the right access and the right size, and it narrows these sites down really quickly, and that's what the challenge is. So the Employment Reserve is a start to get us to point towards, and that's where we go to first when Jeff calls. We look at those sites first because they went through this rigorous process and they were identified. But there are others that are out there, but they're typically farther from services, harder to serve with utilities and power. So yeah, it gets complicated and challenging.
It gets pretty tough pretty fast on these sites. But I think the bigger picture for us is just we want to make sure you had good information to work with and know that there's probably some things that we're going to have to think about as a community, particularly as we're growing so fast, to think about where industrial property is and how we actively protect it and actively develop it, if that's fair. If that's fair for you, Jeff.
So as to the issue of compatibility, I think one of the reasons why carving the edges off of these sites is problematic is because you end up with a site that's not big enough to allow you to do the things that you can do to mitigate these kinds of uses. The issue with respect to PACOM, which I know is kind of, one of the thorns in your side, just being out in your part of the world. If it were on a smaller site, they would not have the ability to do what they're doing now, which is provide additional access. It's not that the initial design, is there and it's perfect and it's forever. If you have enough land, you can engineer that stuff. You can make it work. You can provide for circulation. You can provide for access. If you carve those sites down to, there's enough room for the building and the parking, but that's it, then you've really undercut your ability to engineer, to design that compatibility. I also have to say, for me, market demand is not the only relevant consideration here. We're here to decide what's best for the community, for the city as a whole. And Plan OKC is sort of the embodiment of that, our attempt to foster that exercise and meet that goal. If there are things about it we don't like, we're not free to just disregard them on a day-to-day basis because we don't like that or how it applies here. If we're not comfortable with something about the plan and how it operates, then, it's our plan. We can change it. But I don't think we can just decide we're not going to do that because we don't agree with the underpinning philosophy. That was all done as it was planned and formed and adopted, and it's what we have. If we want to change it, we're free to do that, but it's what we have now. So,
There are a variety of users that are going to have needs, as your presentation illustrates. I pick on Paycom because it's an easy target. I love having them as a neighbor. I love having them as a neighbor. They use their property when I don't, and I use mine when they're not there. It's great. Were there a couple of little oversights in terms of things like shades on parking garages for lighting? Yeah, that would have been neat. But overall, I get the idea of the master plan development. I just think, and every one of us answers differently. Here's the great thing. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, every one of these chairs might change, and it's a whole other group of idiots that are trying to make decisions about here and learn all over again, right? But at least for me, it's going to consistently be a balance. And I think for everybody, that balance may be a little different. But it's really hard for me to look at a landowner, okay, and say, when somebody knocks on your door and is ready to cash you out and build houses and you've got stuff across the street, man, that's a tough one for me. Similarly, if somebody came in and wanted to build, employment reserve and it were appropriate, and given that, but I got a room full of people that are going to see me to the parking lot, right, when I put a large-scale manufacturer across in their kids' elementary school,
right.
Boy, that's going to be a tough one, too. I think it's a balance. And I think they're going to I think it's one of the toughest issues we deal with, honestly. I really do. Yeah. And we got other tough issues coming down the pipeline that are sort of similar. I think it's going to get harder. I think it's going to get easier. But I don't disagree with you, Janice. It's going to be different for everybody. And the thing that's hard, and that's why I say please continue to work with the city, the staff, because these chairs change, viewpoints change, we all differ, and certainty is your friend.
Well, we just appreciate the overall partnership. We have had our relationship to do economic development in Oklahoma City is one where it's hard to understand sometimes in a very positive way, particularly on project relationships where chamber stops and the city starts. That's a very fluid conversation, which is exactly the conversation we want. We want to present a unified front. And the fact that we're having these big picture conversations is exactly the discussion we want to have. We really want to have this conversation so we can think about what does Oklahoma City look like 10 years from now, and how do we make sure that we're well positioned for that. And isn't it great that we're having a conversation about how to grow in the right way? That's a great discussion. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. Do we have any other comments or questions or issues we want to explore? Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you. Let's continue this conversation.
Okay, I kind of blew past our agenda. I'm sorry. We were on additional items and then communications and reports, planning commission committees, which we don't have planning commission members. That was my presentation from the economic development in Oklahoma City. A resolution honoring Jimmy Allen. Jimmy Allen was a planning commissioner when I came on. He'd been here many years. He served with me the whole time I was on. He died recently, quite suddenly, I believe. And so I felt like it was appropriate for us to do something to mark that passing. Would you read the resolution for us,
I will.
please?
Whereas Jimmy Allen was born in Stonewell, Oklahoma on August 24th, 1938, and passed away on February 19th, 2019. Whereas Jimmy Allen served the residents of Ward 4 on the Oklahoma City Planning Commission from February 3rd, 2004 to September 12th, 2017. And whereas Jimmy Allen also served as a member of the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment from April 14th, 2009 to October 22nd, 2013. And whereas Jimmy Allen also volunteered his time to serve as a member of the Oklahoma City Bond Advisory Committee from May 7th, 2002 to February 3rd, 2004. And whereas Jimmy Allen's expertise and knowledge as a home builder and appraiser was beneficial to the Planning Commission and residents of Oklahoma City in facilitating decisions that created a better community. And whereas during Jimmy Allen's tenure on the Planning Commission, he participated in the development and adoption of multiple area, corridor, and sector plans, updates to the city's subdivision regulations, numerous studies that have guided growth across the entire city, and the adoption of the city's comprehensive plan, Plan OKC. And whereas Jimmy Allen loved fishing, spending time at his farm, and being with his family. And whereas Jimmy is survived by his wife of 57 years, Sharon, son Jimmy Allen II, daughter Sherry Harrell, and husband Craig, 2 grandsons, Dakota and Dayton, 2 great-grandchildren, Bryson and Elizabeth, and 2 sisters, Pat Allen and Kay Tomlinson. And whereas Jimmy Allen served Oklahoma City and its residents in exemplary fashion, and with his passing, we now honor his memory and celebrate his public service. Now therefore be it resolved by the Planning Commission of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby honor Jimmy Allen for his public service and extend their deepest sympathies to his family and friends.
So before we vote on this, I don't know, did any of you know Jimmy at all? He was just a wonderful human being, and he was really sort of committed to the process and to doing like anything, that he needed to do to make it work. Just wherever he needed to serve or to be, he would do that. His professional background, he'd been a developer himself, and it gave him both a background, just a wealth of knowledge, but also kind of a standing in the development community that served him and the city really well for just many, many years. He was so knowledgeable about Ward 4. It's like you never had to worry about anything. He could recite just chapter and verse of every development project in the last 20 years off the top of his head. And there were not code enforcement issues in his ward. It's like he would call people up and go over there, and it's like, you need to do something about this, and it got done. He was just really amazing. He was the elevator pitch would be, old school gentleman versus good old country boy. I mean, he loved to hunt and fish, spend time on the farm. His love of family was just written all over him. He was always polite, courteous. I never saw him even slightly annoyed with somebody. I mean, he was just very even keel. And he was just the kind of person that you felt like you were a better person for having known him. So the city was really lucky to have him while we did, and we'll miss him. I'll take a motion.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to adopt a resolution honoring Jimmy Allen. Would you cast your votes, please? And it is adopted. We did have someone signed up. Where am I? Am I down? No, we're not there yet. Planning Department.
We don't have anything.
Okay. Development Services. Where is Citizens to be Heard?
Right under that.
Oh, right down here. I'm sorry. Municipal Counselors, you're next. No. Citizens to be Heard. There was a gentleman here for the longest time. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, Mr. Summers, if you're out there and listening, we hope you come back and speak to us later. Mr. Warrior, I see you here. Are you just visiting? Did you have something you wanted to say to us?
Well, let me just ask one question.
If you're going to do that, you have to come down to the microphone.
Yes.
Give us your name and address.
Yes, Zonafin Warrior, 5712 North Lottie Avenue. It was one item was on the consent docket that I wasn't here for, and it was item number 9. I think that was deferred until June concerning rezoning of 2410 Northeast 23rd Street.
Yes.
Was that applicant going to zone that as some type of Dollar General store?
Yes.
Is my understanding that has been put on a moratorium? Is that understood by the City Council?
Yes. And the applicant requested that the item be continued, and we did that. I don't think I'm saying too much to say that he indicated that they're looking at whether they can provide fresh fruits and vegetables at the store to perhaps facilitate the issues surrounding the moratorium and the food desert issues. So I think there will be discussions ongoing during the time that it's been continued.
Okay. So you assume that he possibly will have the applicant be coming up for, if those modifications are made, in the June meeting, or is that still up in the air?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We continued it to a date certain, didn't we?
June 13th, according to the program agenda.
And we'll see what happens between now and then, or whether they come back to us.
And Mr. Warrior, we're going to continue, Councilwoman Nice and I are going to continue to meet with the attorney representing the developer. So
yes.
I don't know if you have my contact information, but I'm happy to have you, reach out to me, and I'll reach out to you as things go on. But that information about them considering adding whether they can comply with the request of the moratorium is still ongoing, but I think they're going to try at least, so.
I see. And the facility, what is it? Is it going to be a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree, or is it not affiliated with?
Dollar General.
Dollar General is going to be affiliated with Dollar General. Okay. That's the only thing I had concern about. All right, thank you.
It's a long time to sit on that bench to have to ask that question. It really is. Okay. Other business. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.